call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the Committee of Adjustment meeting of April 16th, 2019. My name is Mario Russo, Committee Chair. This is a meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. The Committee of Adjustment is composed of 5 citizen members who are appointed by Brampton City Council. The committee is authorized by the Ontario Planning Act to consider applications for minor variances from the provisions of the City of Brampton zoning bylaw. The committee also considers applications for consent, sometimes referred to as land division applications, which includes severing a new lot from an existing lot, a lot addition, easements, mortgages, or leases in excess of 21 years. I'd like to introduce the committee members. Firstly, to my immediate right, member Mr. Ron Chadha. To my far right, member Mr. Richard Nurse. To my immediate left, member Ms. Desiree Doppler. And to my far left, Mr. Robert Crouch. And again, my name is Mario Russo. Seated at the table in front of the committee is Ms. Jeannie Myers, Secretary-Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment. And seated near the podium, we have city staff members who will assist the committee today. Staff, can I please have your introductions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Elizabeth Corzola. I'm the Manager of Zoning and Sign Bylaw Services.
Morning, Chair. My name is Bernie Steiger. I'm Manager Development Services.
Morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Rob Nicky Fortune, Development Planner, working on portion of the applications.
Thank you, sir. Before we consider today's applications, the committee has some procedural matters to take care of. Firstly, the adoption of minutes. Minutes of the meeting held March 26, 2019. The minutes of the previous meeting are presented in today's agenda. Committee members, are there any questions or concerns with these minutes? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 26, 2019 as they are presented?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Mr. Chadha, seconded by Ms. Doppler. All in favor? That carries. We move on to declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Does any member have a declaration of pecuniary interest to declare on any matter being discussed today?
Chair, A18139, previous working relationship.
Okay, thank you.
Myself as well. The same file, A18139, 1453 Queen Street West, and it's the same reason.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Seeing none. We do have a, we move on to withdrawals and deferrals. We have a written request for deferral on application A19058, 8 Hodgson Street, Brampton, Ontario. Is the applicant or agent here today? Sir, would you like to just step forward for one moment? Oh, so, okay, thank you. And I have a written request for deferral to the, I believe, the next meeting, the May meeting. And staff?
Staff are supportive of this. We're hoping to get to a mutual agreement on some of the aspects of the application, so we're supportive of it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none. Committee, how would we like to deal with the deferral request?
Motion to defer.
To the next meeting, is that May 7th?
May 7th.
May 7th meeting? Seconded by Mr. Crouch. All in favor? That carries. That is deferred to the May 7th meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other requests for deferral or withdrawals? Sir, would you like to step forward, please?
Power Group. The following number is A17170-175.
Okay.
We asked for a deferral up to about 6 months because of the road widening and the road impact study.
Okay.
That's requested.
So you just a time frame is what you're looking for?
Is it just a deferral at the moment?
Okay. Staff, how would we like to, or any recommendations on the deferral request?
Staff have completed a comprehensive review of the variance request and would not be in support of the deferral request at this time. The application was deferred indefinitely at the October 3rd, 2017 committee hearing, and staff believe that there's some activity on site, so we'd like to, our preference would be to deal with this variance request today rather than at a later date.
Okay. Committee members, any questions?
And just a quick question through you, Chair. Is that indefinite deferral you're seeking, or are you putting it down?
No, just up to 6 months because of the road widening, and they want a traffic impact study on what we're doing there, and just changing it from oversized vehicles to construction equipment storage.
Okay.
Any comments? Mr. Doppler?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a question. Since the deferral date, since the previous deferral, has there been any progress made in terms of conversations with city staff? Because I know from the report that we received, this file, this date is the same as the previous.
Yes, part of it is my experience on it as well, but they are widening the road there, so there's significant construction. And one of the things that was requested was a traffic impact study. And because it'd be inaccurate with and the time frame of having that study provided. I'm sorry? For a request back to opening it, is that what you're asking? Yes. Just last month? Yes.
So, through the chair, to my knowledge, there hasn't been really any conversations with, as you, the committee may remember, there was a tie decision, and since then the application was held in abeyance because of that, and now it's come forward again, but there hasn't been any further discussions on changing the application or anything to that, with that regard, from my knowledge anyways, on this property. It's still the same variance request as the last time, and that's one we can't support, and we would prefer that just simply a decision be made on it one way or another so that we can move forward with this. I don't see there's really any, from our view, staff's view, that given the significance of this proposed variance and the impacts, how there could even be a negotiation in that sense in terms of an alternate use and so forth. So in our view, it's just simply not an appropriate use for the property. But so we'd prefer to have a a decision on the application made. So.
Just a question. I didn't know if there are a couple of heavy pieces of equipment in the back.
That is my own.
Is any work being done?
No, I just, I moved into the property and it's all hay there, and I'm just putting grass seed down in the grass. I'm sorry? Well, it's easy, and then because I own them, otherwise who wants to do it with a wheelbarrow and a shovel? We deal with it today.
Thank you. I just have a question to staff as well. Looking at the regional comments and stating, or I guess them citing, it would be premature to review the minor variance without receiving and evaluating the requested tertiary plan. Would that be something that, I guess, in light of, I guess, the agent coming on, what is staff, or what has staff requested in the past? Are there certain studies that are outstanding, or have they received studies that have not been supportive? Is that
Yeah, to answer your question, the applicant went through a pre-consultation process back in 2017 as well, and the city identified studies that would be required to formally rezone the property and redesignate it for this purpose. But at this time, we feel that it's fundamentally a land use compatibility concern. It's the proposed land use isn't compatible with the surrounding area, and there's several concerns with respect to that. So despite the submission of studies in support of the variance request, at this time we feel that we would not be able to support the variance.
Okay. I'm just asking, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Sir?
Chair, can I ask a quick question?
Yes,
to the staff,
please.
Just to the staff, regarding the road widening, what's the status there with the region? Because I see that's the progress going on right now.
To my understanding, the road widening is currently underway. Mayfield Road is a regional road, so it's under the jurisdiction of the region. I'm not sure what the status is in terms of completion of that road widening, but despite the road widening and what's being proposed, I don't believe that would have any impact on our decision.
Through you, Mr. Chair, as Chair indicated, due to the road widening, is that impact somehow the variances being sought elsewhere?
No, it would not.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, at this point, if you'd like to step forward, we're still just dealing with the deferral request.
So we can't comment on the situation, or?
I just kind of, we can't start speaking to the actual application itself. Okay. So I just wanted to have the opportunity, have you have the opportunity to speak to it. However, I don't want to get in depth until we actually are either hearing the application or not. Okay. So if you want to just perhaps just state your name and address, and then either perhaps support or objection.
So, first name Party, last name Bola. I live right next door, so 5955.
Okay.
And from the last application, we went through all of this, but they have already gone ahead and constructed the previous notion of whatever that was requested. So we're just here today asking what the process is on that. Like whatever was denied, I guess whatever that happened in the last period, it was kind of put forward, but they've already done everything.
Okay, so we'll just, I guess,
so
committee
regardless of us having a meeting this morning.
I'm not following, like.
Well, I guess we'll have a conversation later, but the last time we had this meeting was, I guess, a person would come forth and bring a proposal to the city, and then the city and everybody would get together and make a decision. And then I guess since the last decision it was a no, but since that decision, they're already at 73% completion of the proposal.
Okay, I'll ask staff in terms of, I'm not following.
They've already done whatever that they needed to do.
This is for a dump site and for trucking, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah.
Excuse me, that's correct. It's for, excuse me, outside storage and use of the house as an office. And yes, I can confirm that a great deal of regrading of the lot has already occurred.
Yeah. Okay. But in terms of outside storage and things along those lines?
Nothing has been observed at this point in time. They're still working on what I presume to be the parking lot.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. So if there are no further comments, I guess, or any questions, I leave it for committee to put forward a motion on how we would deal with the deferral request.
I move to refuse the deferral.
Okay. Move to refuse deferral, seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? That carries. So the deferral is denied. So we will be hearing this. It would fall back into the queue. Okay, sir? Is there any other requests for deferrals or withdrawals? Seeing none. So quickly, for those unfamiliar with the Committee of Adjustment procedure and process, I'd like to give a brief explanation and scope. Following some procedural matters which we have already undergone, the Secretary Treasurer will call the applications by announcing the application number, the name of the application, of the applicant, and the address of the property subject to the application. The applicant or authorized agent representing the applicant will then come down to the podium, state their name and address for the record, and present their application. I request that you reserve any questions or comments pertaining to the staff report until after planning staff has had an opportunity to present. If there's anyone in attendance who wishes to speak on any particular application, you will be given the opportunity to do so when the application is presented. Any decision made here today may be appealed to the local appeal tribunal, the LPAT. Previously, the appeal process was dealt through the Ontario Municipal Board. However, the province has introduced new legislation in the form of Bill 139, which came into force April 3rd, 2018. Appeals received in the city clerk's office associated with the minor variance and consent applications will then be processed and forwarded to the LPAT, as they were previously processed and sent to the OMB. This process may be commenced with the Secretary-Treasurer by filing a completed appeal form and filing fee within the prescribed 20-day appeal period. Information pertaining to the appeal process may be obtained by contacting the Secretary-Treasurer within the city clerk's office. We now move on to new consent applications. Ms. Myers?
Calling applications B19-005 and B19-006, Archad Investments Inc. and Archad Properties. The properties are located on Remembrance Road.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and staff. My name is Vladimir Rudenko. I'm a planner on behalf of Archad Properties and Archad Investment. And I'm presenting here two consent applications for two properties located at the southwest corner of McLaughlin and Remembrance Roads. And the effect of these two applications to request consent from the committee for mutual easements to access both properties as required by the Planning Act. By the matter of background, a site plan application has been recently approved for both properties for development of the sites for a commercial plaza. However, because the legal owners of two properties require easements for accesses to the properties and mutual easements to use the whole commercial plaza, and this is consent that is required by the Planning Act in order to establish the easements. That's the reason why we submitted these two applications. The purpose of the easements is to provide site accesses, shared driveways, and the owner also wants to have the easement with respect to the parking area on both sides. We have reviewed with the owner the recommended conditions of approval. We have 3 recommended conditions, and I have to mention that we agree with all the conditions, and that the reference plans for both easements have been already drafted, and we have previously submitted those reference plans to the committee. So we agree with the imposed conditions. And I will be happy to answer any questions that the committee will have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. When speaking to the staff's recommendations and the conditions, we do have some draft conditions that the Secretary-Treasurer, you've had an opportunity to review those as well? Okay, just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to review those. Committee members, any questions? Seeing none? Mr. Yes?
Mr. Chair, to the applicant, what happened with the 2017 application?
The applications were approved at that time with a condition that the applicant had to register the reference plans that I just mentioned within 1 year. However, at that time, the site plan was still in the process, and location and boundaries of driveways and parking area was still kind of work in progress. So the reference plan was not complete. So accordingly, the conditional approval lapsed, and that's the reason the applicant had to resubmit those applications in 2 years.
And it's just happenstance that the easement's identical?
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on these applications? Seeing none. Staff, would you like to weigh in, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As the applicant indicated, this was previously before the committee, was approved, and it lapsed. The previous application also did include a request for not only vehicular and pedestrian access, but for parking, which was granted at that time. The current application, as it was submitted, did not include parking, and the report was written in that manner that didn't reference parking. Now that we understand the applicant's requesting to add parking as an additional easement, then we are supportive. We've canvassed staff in different departments, and we have no concerns. We supported it before, we support it again. I would have to amend my first condition to reflect parking in there as well. But staff have reviewed the applicant's proposal with regards to Section 5124 of the Planning Act and advised that the proposed consent applications, both of them, are considered to represent proper and orderly planning and can be supported from a planning land use perspective, subject to this following condition, that being that these applications be approved subject to the following condition being imposed, that the requested reciprocal, and here I add the word parking, pedestrian and vehicular access easements to be established on the two parcels shall be registered on title in favor of the respective lots to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services. The mutual pedestrian and vehicular access easements shall be in perpetuity over the lands described as blocks 132, Plan 43M 1969, Brampton PIN number, and block 133, Plan 43M 1969, and the PIN number, for the purpose of pedestrian and vehicular access to and from McLaughlin Road, Remembrance Road, and Clinton Street, and across the respective properties, and the wording of which is to be to the satisfaction of the City Solicitor, the Commissioner of Public Works and Engineering, and the Commissioner of Planning and Development Services Department. The easement documents shall contain wording to the satisfaction of the City Solicitor that the owner waives and releases the city from any claim for compensation, injurious affection, or other damages, claims, demands, losses, costs, suits, or other proceedings arising or which may arise as a result of such access easements, arrangements. That concludes the, it's been legally reviewed, as you can see.
And Mr. Steiger?
Just as a, maybe the Secretary Treasurer can comment. So the application does need to be formally changed in some manner because parking wasn't included as a request initially. So I believe indirectly the applicant here is requesting it. So I don't know if there has to be some decision or acknowledgement made on that.
Ms. Myers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if it is the will of the committee consider that this is relatively minor amendment to the application, and information can be provided, we can proceed with it with that amendment.
Okay.
With parking included.
Committee? Understanding the, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Steiger. And sir, as you mentioned, you agree and accept those the condition as stated, and also the draft conditions put forward by the Secretary Treasurer as well.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Committee members?
Motion to approve as amended with respect to parking and subject to conditions.
Thank you by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Mr. Nurse. All in favor? That carries. They are approved, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and staff.
Thank you.
Calling application B19007 for Cap Holdings Inc. Property is located at 81 and 91 Delta Boulevard.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Colin Chung, Blanchard Associates. I'm here on behalf of the applicant for Cap Holdings Inc. I think you'll recall, Mr. Chairman, we were before you about a year ago on the same application for consent. The reason for the application before you today is that the one-year provisional consent condition had lapsed, and we didn't fulfill one condition dealing with the cleanup of the site, had some outside storage. There was some difficulty between the applicant and the tenant, and we just couldn't fill that condition within 1 year. So we're refiling the application We're confident now that we can fulfill that condition with other conditions that are related to the consent application. For background, Mr. Chairman, just in case you want to know some background to this, this is a lot acquisition of 2 lots by the same owner. And at the time, it was acquired under the same legal title and automatically merged. There was a bit of a legal complication as to why that happened legally, because CN Rail had taken part of the 2 lots and created part lots on a register M plan, and legally it became a merged title, as opposed to 2 full lots under the same title would have created 2 different titles because of the CN took some land and it became a part lot. There was some, I call it legal nuance as to what caused this. So the owners simply wanted to revert back to creating 2 original lots. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none. Committee, any questions? Seeing none. Staff, would you like to weigh in, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As was indicated, it's previously submitted, previously approved, subject to staff had 2 conditions at the time, one of which was for a standard condition we typically impose for it determined that the site be serviced independently, and if any easements needed, that they be obtained. But in this case, through the further review, we determined that the sites could be independently serviced. As such, for the new proposal, we are not recommending that condition this time round. So as indicated, this application has been reviewed under Section 5124 of the Planning Act, and staff advised that the proposed consent application is considered to represent proper and orderly planning and can be supported from a land use perspective, subject to the following condition, that the applicant provide confirmation satisfactory to the Director of Development Services that any outside storage on either the severed or retained lands complies with the zoning bylaw or has been removed if not permitted. And majority of it has been cleaned up. There's just a few minor things to be taken off site, so lots been done since last meeting.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I went on site there, and it's just a vacant lot for all intents and purposes.
Almost, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. So, okay. Any questions by committee members? So, sir, you understand and agree to those conditions imposed?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Motion to approve. Seconded by Mr. Chada. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Thank you.
Thank you.
Calling application B 19008, Long Haul Holdings Inc. Property is located at 8970 Goreway Drive.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Eric Roitsu. I'm from Kendall, and I'm the applicant here on behalf of the owner for the property at 8970 Goreway Drive. The purpose for our request here today is to permit an easement for an existing private water main in favor of the adjacent neighbor at 3455 Queen Street East. Ms. Myers has given me the conditions, the draft conditions, I should say, and we have no issues with those either.
Thank you. Okay. Committee members, any questions to the agent? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the site contains an existing Tim Hortons restaurant. It shares access easements with the adjacent properties to the north and south, and has its own servicing arrangements. They're proposing to provide this water main service and easement across the north limit of their property to facilitate development to the west. Staff are supportive of this proposal. It's been reviewed in accordance with Section 5124 of the Planning Act, and staff advise that the proposed consent application is considered to represent proper and orderly planning and can be supported from a land use perspective, subject to the following condition, that the requested water main easement to be established on the property shall be in perpetuity and registered on title in favor of the abutting lands to the west, to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services and the City Solicitor. The easement document shall contain wording to the satisfaction of the City Solicitor that the owner waives and releases the city from any claims or compensation, injurious affection, or other damages, claims, losses, costs, suits, or other proceedings arising or which may arise as a result of such servicing arrangements.
Committee members, any questions to staff? Seeing none. So, sir, you indicated that that condition is fine and also the acceptable to you and the draft conditions as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. If not, and if no further comments, seeking a motion to approve. Motion to approve by Mr. Nurse, seconded by Mr. Crouch. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Calling application A18091, Siraj Dai Audit. Property is located at 24 Eastway Street.
Mr. Chairman. My name is Ivers Koulides. I'm the agent for Audit Siraj Dai from 24 Eastway Street. Would like to build a sunroom addition. He's asking for some variance approvals on rear yard setbacks and
Okay. Anything further at this point, sir?
no.
Any members, any questions to the agent? Seeing none at this time. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none. Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff reviewed the application against the four tests as outlined in the Planning Act and are recommending approval in part subject to 11 conditions of approval. Condition 1, that variance 1, 2, and 8 be refused. Condition 2, that the owner restore the required 0.6 meter permeable landscape strip between the driveway and side property line within 90 days from the date of the decision of the committee. Condition 3, that the owner obtain a building permit for the accessory structure in the exterior side yard and the below-grade entrance within 60 days from the date of the decision of the committee. 4, that the owner relocate the existing accessory structure in the rear yard to ensure that it is set back minimum 0.6 meters from all property lines within 90 days from the decision of the committee. 5, that the accessory building in the rear yard shall not be used as a separate dwelling and that the permission for habitable space in the accessory building shall be limited to the provision of a sink. 6, that the existing accessory structure in the rear yard of the property remain of an open style construction. 7, that all drainage from the existing accessory structures and proposed sunroom addition be contained solely within the limits of the subject property. 9, that the below-grade entrance shall not be used for the purpose of accessing an unregistered second unit. That was 8. 9, that the owner maintain the general location of the existing wood-board fence to ensure that the below-grade entrance in the exterior side yard remains entirely screened from public view. 10, that the extent of variances 3, 4, and 7 be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. And lastly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions will render the approval null and void.
Thank you. Any questions by committee members to staff?
Through you, Chair, just a comment. During my site visit, I noticed the below-grade entrance workmanship is really poorly done. So is that how, is staff aware about that? Like, is that the proper shape? I don't believe, I don't see myself, that's the perfect way of putting together below-grade entrance or riding entrance.
Sorry, could you repeat that with respect to your concern?
During my site visit, through Mr. Chair, I noticed the below-grade entrance constructurally poorly workmanship, and the way it constructs now, I was not satisfied, so I hope staff is looking at that and positive, but it is going to be looked after at that later stage.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that very well could be the case. As such, we've included a condition that the applicant obtain a building permit for the below-grade entrance in the exterior side yard to ensure that it's built in compliance with the Ontario Building Code.
Yeah, and just to that, I echoed Mr. Chada's concerns, but was satisfied when the condition of building permit is there. So if there, that can be reviewed by experts at that point.
No, I know, Chair, but I just wanted to bring.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? So, sir, there are numerous conditions associated with this recommendation from staff. So, have you had an opportunity to review all those conditions and share with your applicant, and they are acceptable to them, and understand the ramifications and what the extent that has to be done in order to comply?
Right.
Okay, so they are acceptable to you and your client?
Yeah.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just confirming, are we including an additional condition that the applicant obtain a building permit for the below-grade entrance?
No, they,
No?
I guess Mr. Chadha, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Chadha, but his concern, staff had already included the condition of a building permit as condition number 3. So unless some other wording or anything else would like to be included, but I believe that was already captured in staff's recommendations.
I do have one small request for your consideration through the chair. The conditions, actually, the 2 conditions that require that the driveway and the one shed be brought into compliance with the zoning bylaw are given 90 days in order to comply. But at the same time, a condition has been established that a building permit for the below grade and for the accessory structure, and I assume also for the proposed sunroom, be obtained within 60 days. And that causes a catch-22 for the owner in as much as they won't be able to clear the conditions unless they do it in advance of the 90 days. So it would be my request that the committee consider just establishing a standard time frame for all 3 of those compliance issues, whether it be 90 or 60, I have no opinion.
Okay.
Through you, Chair, I would support 90 days for condition number 3.
Okay, just so that's uniform?
Yep.
Committee members? Okay, consensus, yeah? Okay, so sir, that, just for clarity, you understand that staff has just highlighted the fact that the amendment to condition 3 to read 90 days as well. Okay. Clear with that, sir?
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Okay, so any questions by committee members? If not, seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to support in part in accordance with the staff report with the amendment to condition 3 from 60 to 90 days.
Thank you, Mr. Crouch. Seconded by Mr. Chadha. All in favor? That is approved with the amended conditions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Calling application A19049, Daniels LR Corporation. Property is located at 58 and 62 Sky Harbor Drive.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman. I think my name is already on the record, so I'm here representing Daniels LR Corporation. Just for background, Mr. Chairman, Daniels Corporation own a sliver of land on the east side of Mississauga Road, just north of Financial Drive in West Brampton. Their development comprised of 3 stages of development, and you'll see that when you went on site, the phase 1 portion is already built with the retail on the main floor, with residential on the second floors. They're proceeding with their phase 2 development, which is immediately to the north of phase 1. It's an empty lot today. We are advancing site plan application with the City of Brampton. It's going fairly well. As a result of site plan review, City identified a few variances that are required to implement the site plan. I'm not going to get into the 4 variances, it's on record. We are seeking your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, for your consideration of the variances, enabled to allow us to advance the site plan application to approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. Any questions by committee members to the agent? Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff have reviewed the application and variance requests in accordance with the 4 tests outlined in the Planning Act and are recommending approval subject to 4 conditions. Condition number 1, that the requirement for parking for any combination of uses permitted within the OC 2030 zone be calculated at the applicable parking rate in accordance with the zoning bylaw and shall not exceed 207 parking spaces. Condition 2, that the owner finalize site plan approval under City File SP 18-019, execute a site plan agreement and post any required financial securities and insurance to the satisfaction of Director of Development Services. 3, that the extent of the variances 1, 3, and 4 be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to public notice. And lastly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you. Any questions by committee members to staff?
Mr. Chair.
Yes?
To staff,
The applicant submitted a parking justification report, which we forwarded to our transportation engineering group. I'm sure that they looked at everything and took all things into consideration and found it to be acceptable. I can't really speak to the conclusions of their findings, but they are in support of the requested parking reduction.
It seems significant though, doesn't it? It's gonna leave about, what, one spot per unit?
Approximately, it will be about 1 spot per unit. In most situations, when there's a parking variance in excess of a 10% deviation or 12% deviation, requested parking justification study be provided. The applicant's done so, and it's been found to be acceptable.
Thank you.
And I have one question to staff, and I guess to the agent as well, just more for future. Similar to the previous applications we heard, the access point is going to be a shared access point. Are there any easements or anything that is required, or is that going to be captured or has been captured in site plan? Just more for clarity so that you're not having to come back potentially for that type of...
Mr. Chairman, the Daniels Corporation, their desire is to create these phased approach development, and they're individual condominiums, and each phase has its own access. And so I think from an access perspective, legally there's independent access to all 3 phases, all 3 condo corps. In my opinion, in the event of furthering our site plan application, because now we're dealing with phase 1, which is already existing condo, to phase 2, which is going to be the second condo, and through site plan application process, if we determine, working with the city, that some type of permanent access easement would be required through the phases, that's something that we have to advance a separate application for. So thank you very much for that foresight.
Yeah, thank you. So staff, is that, I guess, echoed by staff as well, or Mr. Steiger?
I don't, that's through the chair, to the chair, not to speak incorrectly, but if they're through the condominium applications, we maybe probably are securing rights. So when the condominium is being put in place, it's included in that is easements for the neighboring properties to access over it. So those things are being taken care of through that process if there's any requirement for that. So.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chung, you've seen the staff recommendations and the conditions associated. Are they acceptable to you?
They're generally acceptable, Mr. Chairman, but I do want to make sure that we're on record about one condition from staff. And we had discussion with staff, so it's not a concern raised. The condition from staff report is dealing with condition number 3. Condition number 3 deals with variance number 1, 3, and 4. And those 3 variances, Mr. Chairman, relate to the proposed transformer station, which is along Mississauga Road, and a retaining wall within the part of the landscaping area. The way the condition is written today in the report, it's approved, if it's approved by the committee today, it ties those conditions to the, I call it the minor variance sketch that was filed that's before the public notice. And in that sketch, it shows specific areas of the transformer station and the retaining wall. And we wanted to make sure that we have clarity with staff before today's meeting, and we did get that clarity, which is that we're not bound to the exact location of the transformer station and the retaining wall that's shown in the sketch that's before the public notice, because as you know, Mr. Chairman, through site plan process, things get tweaked, things get refined, and we don't want to get tied down to making minor adjustment to a transformer station, for example, where we have to be bound to file another minor variance application. So we got clarification from staff that there are flexibility in that condition for minor adjustments on the location, as long as we meet the variance that we saw for the transformer and the retaining wall as part of the landscaping area. So I just want to be on record, because sometimes in life, if you not put things on record and make it very clear, there's confusion.
Let me pose the question to staff, because I think we've dealt with this often before in the wording perhaps, and I asked staff as a question, as opposed to limited, would the term generally be more acceptable or more, I guess, prudent to what we're looking at this point in time?
Yes, staff would be in support of altering condition number 3 to speak to that the extent of variances 1, 3, and 4 generally be limited to the sketch shown on the attached to public notice.
And I guess that captures the spirit of what we're trying to, or what you're
Mr. Chairman, great suggestion, and I'd be happy to support that amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any questions by committee members? So all other recommendations and so forth are acceptable to you?
Thank you.
Seeking a motion then to proceed.
Motion to approve amended conditions.
By Mr. Chada, seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? That carries with the amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Calling application A19050, Ragnish and Rajni Pragabar. The property is located at 150 Bloomsbury Avenue.
I'm the agent for 150 Bloomsbury Avenue.
Just your name again, sir, for the record?
Ivor Squilidis,
Thank you.
and they would like to build a sunroom addition and are hoping that you can approve some of the minor variance requests on rear yard setback and side yard setback.
Thank you. Any questions by committee members to the agent? Seeing none at this time, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, do want to just add for the record, the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority has provided their comments, and at this time, no objection to the application. So that's been, that will be submitted in for the record. Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff reviewed the application against the 4 tests outlined in the Planning Act and are recommending approval subject to 3 conditions. Condition number 1, that drainage from the sunroom addition be contained solely within the limits of the subject property. Condition 2, that the extent of variances 1, 2, and 3 be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. And lastly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee will render the approval null and void.
Thank you. Any questions by committee members to staff? Seeing none, sir, the staff recommendations and conditions before you, are those acceptable at this time?
Yes.
Okay. So if there are no further comments, seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to approve the application with conditions.
Motion to approve with conditions as indicated by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Calling application A19051, Sukhdev Pander. The property is located at 2838 Bovaird Drive West.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Nino Matarolo, and this is my daughter Elise and my son Mitchell. And we are presenting for Sukhdev Singh Pander, the owner of 2838 Bovaird Drive West in Ward 6. The site is generally located on the north side of Bovaird Drive, west of Heritage Road. It is occupied by 2 dwellings, being a farmhouse and a cottage, both of which are currently leased for residential purposes, and 3 farm structures which are currently used for storage and farming equipment. We were last here and reviewed this property. The file number was A17149, and we were supported by the following conditions for an educational camp. Permitted were for 3 years. We had camp hours that ran from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. We had 15 students and 3 staff. We had no internal use of structures or on the grounds. We provide our own potable washrooms. And the camp would run from July to August. We have recently granted our camp hours to run from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. We thank you for the allowance extending to our camp this time. Our summer camp had a lot of interest for the summer of 2018. However, because of the original camp times, parents and guardians found that it was not feasible the amount of time with their regular work hours, so it was hard to enroll students to come. We would like to apply to extend our educational camp from March to October. We can then purpose March break as well as extend our educational programs into the fall months. So we would like to clarify that the summer camp welcomes students of all abilities and diversities, and we have allowance to extend our camp months as well. We'd like to cater our camp to students who are in special needs only. I am a certified Ontario teacher who has been teaching special needs students for over 30 years. And I see a need for outdoor education facilities for students with said needs. Our educational camp is a perfect fit. The students will be engaged in hands-on activities which will enhance their learning, all of which is through the Ontario curriculum.
If I can just quickly say something. So both of my parents are teachers, and Patrick Brown also his.
Sorry, again, just for clerical.
Oh, my name?
For the record.
Elise Myrolo. I just think there's a big need for this education in Brampton, and in order for our city to grow, it's important that we have camps like this for students who really need it. So we've been working hard with the curriculum. We're trying to think outside the box and do hands-on mindfulness, anti-bullying, and the importance of having an all-abilities camp and encourage diversity is really important to us. So as we mentioned, right now we only have 2 months to work with said students, but we'd like to extend that to allow for March break or special days, whether it be like a PA day, just not traditional school hours. That would be great, just to, again, encourage more anti-bullying mindfulness, just allow more of these camps to happen in Brampton, outdoor.
I did note that in your original application, there was comments pertaining to that.
Yes, sorry, Chairman. We were brainstorming and we thought, okay, let's just put it in there just to see what you would say. Like,
Okay. Yeah. And I guess we'll have staff read their recommendations and stuff, and we can go over those conditions as well. Anything further at this point in time?
No, we're good.
Okay. Any questions by committee members? None at this time. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none? Staff, would you like to weigh in, please? Oh, just for the record as well, we do have a letter from the Credit Valley Conservation.
Yes.
No objection at this time as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff reviewed the application and support tests outlined in the Planning Act and are recommending that the application be approved, subject to 6 conditions of approval. Condition 1, that the summer educational camp be permitted for a temporary period of 3 years from the date of the decision of the committee. Condition 2, that the summer educational camp be permitted to operate only between Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. during the months of July and August. Condition 3, that a maximum of 15 students and 3 staff members be permitted to participate in the summer educational camp per session. Condition 4, that there be no internal use or alteration of the existing buildings on the property, and that the summer educational camp in its entirety be operated outside. Condition 5, that prior to the operation of the summer educational camp, the owner shall provide confirmation to the satisfaction of the chief building official that the owner has entered into an agreement with a private disposal company for the use of portable washrooms. And lastly, failure to comply with the conditions, maintaining the conditions of the committee will render the approval null and void.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. So I guess speaking to some of the comments from the applicant, condition 2 reads the July and August. Would there be any consideration from staff's perspective to extend that, or is there some reason that the July and August is steadfast in terms of the condition?
As outlined in the applicant's cover letter, there was some consideration to extend the months of operation to December and March and other times throughout the year. There is some concern that the camp would not be able to operate solely outside as an outdoor camp if it were to operate in winter months, in the months of March. With that being said, if they were to occupy any of the facilities on site, it would warrant the requirement for a change of use building permit, which would fundamentally change the use of the property, and staff have concerns with that.
I guess I'll speak to, I guess, an idea I have in terms of that condition, but I'll have committee members, if anyone else would like to speak to it as well.
Mr. Chair, I did note in the application that there was a request also for internal use during inclement weather. So you've been operating now. How have you been working the camp?
The problem, we haven't been operating because of the hours. People were interested in coming to the camp, but the drop off and the pickup was impossible for the parents to accommodate their kids. So we have it mostly set up. I don't know if you have the pictures. We got it all set up. We have no one there. So we wanted to get it started. In regards to inclement weather, we would because we can't add any other buildings, we can't, adjust anything, so we would just have like the tents, or we would have an inclement weather day, so the kids would go home or whatever, we'd figure that out in that regards. But our plan was to build these portable, they're called sail tents, so then they would be there for the protection of the students if it rains, right? But there is a structure there, that there is a barn there that has been retrofitted. It's all modernized from the previous owner, and that would be perfect as a class. That's what I'm talking about, the classroom setting. If you ever went to the bottom floor of it, it's all renovated. Everything is updated. It's all modernized. That would be the perfect classroom setting if it were to be inclement rather than using tents.
And through you, Mr. Chair, would that then also pertain to the colder months?
Yes, because it is heat. It has everything. It has it's updated electrical, heating, insulation, the bottom floor. Because of the company there was a company in there before, and they used that as a storage for their products, the barn. But they've totally modernized it.
Let me, if you don't mind, ask staff, but that's not what we're looking at this point in time, correct?
That's correct. Through you, Mr. Chair. Use of any of the buildings on the site would require and involve a change of use building permit. They were not specifically constructed as classrooms or an assembly occupancy, which is what this would be classified as under the terms of the building code, or even an office use. They were warehouse and storage buildings. Most of them are old farm buildings. So there may be additional work that's required. I'm not sure what the natural lighting requirements are, ventilation, exiting, washroom requirements for any internal use of the buildings. Now, if they're going to erect any tents and those tents don't require a building permit, then that would certainly be permitted. They're in an area that's also subject to an interim control bylaw, which is why the suggestion that they cannot build any new structures on this property. And I mean, it might be argued that even change of use to an old structure is not permitted by the interim control bylaw. So there may be other hurdles that would have to be undertaken and resolved.
Would that require a change of use permit? Would that require additional
Variances?
It may require variance to allow the construction, given that there's an interim control. It would either require relief from the interim control through council or through committee.
Okay, so we're not dealing with that at this point in time,
Not
unless...
at this point in time. The issue of the extended hours and whether that's appropriate given the limited use and the requirement that all activities take place outdoors. I'm not certain whether that includes outdoors beneath tents, but I suspect it would if that's something that does not require a building permit. The tent would have to be small enough in size. Any tent, I think it's 60 square meters or more, would require a building permit. So, and then it would be a structure, and then it would be construction, and then it would be restricted because of the interim control. So if it's a small enough tent and it's just used to gather a group of students in inclement weather, that's probably something that could be accommodated if that's sufficient to deal with any kind of climate that you might see in March or October, then that would be something that could be considered.
Thank you. The way the property is set up, there's different areas that are totally protected. There's high walls. Like there were two barns on this farm. One burnt down 200 years ago, and it has like a 9-foot high wall, and that area would be conducive to put like tents in there for the kids. Or on the other side, there are the barn and another garage, and those walls are high enough for protection as well. So we are a nonprofit. We've got our nonprofit now, and we have corporations and people that are willing to donate. So we're looking for donations for these. They're called sail tents. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they look like sails, but then they're portable, and you can just put them up along the walls, and they would serve their purpose. But the barn is the best. But if we can't do that, we can't do that.
And even the tents and these sail tents, that may be something that you could inquire from the building department. If you do not require a permit, then that's something that you can seek that further. So speaking just to the variances that we have right now, I guess I also asked, you have the condition of 15 students and 3 staff members.
Yes.
Is that something that would work? Because we want to make sure that you're not going to be bound by that if that does not work, so this is the time that you can speak to it.
I've been a teacher for over 33 years. I can handle 50 kids. That's no problem. That's no problem, you know. I love my job. I love the kids. I can handle 50 kids, but 15 is fine, you know. And the reason we're looking at also special needs kids, because in a special needs class, you don't have more than 15 kids, right? So if we do extend the time, then I will also have a teacher from the school come in along with me, and then they will have supervision as well. Plus I have volunteers that will be helping me. Some of them are teacher college candidates, or some of them are, they're like part-time teachers or retired teachers.
So my question though is, will the 15 and 3 work for
Oh, yeah.
what you're looking for?
I can extend it, sure, yeah, I can.
Well, this is the condition that staff is recommending. So I
Yes.
just want to make sure you understand that that's the recommendation.
Yes.
If there's something that you're looking for, then this is the time to speak to it. And
Okay.
then we can have the conversation with staff and they can give our
Okay.
rationale.
I believe I wrote in one of my summaries that I can have 15 plus 5 or.
And that's what led me to ask the question, because I saw that in your
Yeah.
notes. So I guess I'll ask the question to staff. The rationale of 15 and 3, was that in terms of occupancy restrictions, or what's the rationale on that?
It wasn't in reference to anything in particular. It was what was requested by the applicant as part of their previous application that was approved back in October of 2017. So the condition just reads to be consistent with that.
Okay, so perhaps if we were to just change the wording on that to have 15 and 5, just so that they're not bound by 3, so that they wouldn't be in conflict with that?
And we have no issues with that.
Okay.
By law, it should be, if you go on a field trip or anything, it should be 1 staff member, which is a teacher, to 15 students.
Okay.
So that,
But, so at this point in time, if we were to amend that from, just so that you have some leeway, if you're
Yes.
going to have more, from 15 to 5. Committee members, any other comments or
yeah, we want to
questions?
extend it, yes.
In the event we changed it to 20 students or pupils, would
Yes.
you then require 4 staff members?
No, three is like overkill. There's enough, yeah, oh, yeah.
Just in case, I understand.
Yeah.
Mr. Chadha?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just roughly 3 staff members can handle how many students? If we ask other,
15.
so even as 20.
Yeah, that's Mr. Croach's point.
Yeah, we're good. When I first started teaching, I had 42 kids, and they're all grade 8, so I can handle as many students. As long as you have a good curriculum, and the kids are like hands-on and they're focused, you're good. So.
Sorry, you're limited to 20.
So I posed a question to staff in terms of the time frame and limiting from July to August. When thinking of that, and I guess I'll speak. Yeah, you can speak to that, Mr. Steiger. Is that the way I would? I guess my suggestion would be that you, including a provision that 1 week maximum at any time for a March break or for seasonal. Are there seasonal concerns? Is that the rationale for the condition as worded?
Well, so this is a variance for a temporary summer camp on an agricultural zone property. So staff support is based on that it's quite limited. If there's any expansion to this should be addressed through another process, such temporary use bylaw or those types of things where the criteria are different to analyze the use itself. So the staff support is based on this being a very limited time frame of use. And yes, I would say that expanding it from March to October, there's going to be, you know, it's cold today, or was this week in April, like having it all outdoors, you know, there's going to be a tendency to try to move some of that indoors. So if there is a consideration, like this is supposed to be a summer camp, which is July, August, maybe June or something like that, but October school's in place, you know, March, April, May, there's still school going on. So what is then the purpose of this? Is it like after school things, or what is happening here, that it's more full-time then on the property and not just sort of a part-time, you know, snapshot of a couple of months in the summer? So if there is a consideration for expending the hours, it would then probably have to be on a limitation in terms of in March, it's for a 1 week period only, or each of the other months, it's only for 1 week in each of the other months or something like that.
And that's what I'm speaking to, exactly that philosophy, is that you, understanding that they're going through the process of attaining this, and going through the process of doing it properly, the fact that you're limiting those 2 months, in the event, as they mentioned, if you have a PA day in September and you want to use it, it won't work the way we're limiting at this point in time. So I think by limiting the amount of time, because I think you're right, is having it for 6 months then completely defeats the purpose. But then saying that they're able to use it for 1 day, or as you mentioned, 1 week at max any other month, or something along those lines, whatever the wording is, then I think the spirit is still met, and also the actual applicant can have the best use of the actual space. But again, I just put that because I think that there is some compromise there. Mr. Crouch?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that, would it be acceptable if we did something like the camp can run on any day that the Peel Board of Education is not scheduled to open the schools?
It's up to, I think from our end, it's more if you limit it somehow and let them decide how they want to run it then in that sense, so.
Well, I'd like to let them, I'm quite confident that they're not there to freeze a whole bunch of disabled kids or challenged kids. And I think, you know, clearly the camaraderie and all that sort of stuff has to be very important to special education kids, and I'd like to be as broad as possible to this camp without offending rezoning. So that's my suggestion.
As well as this property is rich in history. Maud Montgomery, the author of Anne of Green Gables, actually lived in that house. One of the group of 7 at J. Clausen painted on that property. One of the treaties of 1812 was signed near that area, in that area. So there's a lot there that we can talk about. It's next door to the Norval. Did I say it right? Norval. And that was the hub of the Loyalists, and the person, the Laird, was a Loyalist, and that's a big history of Brampton. So that is part of what my curriculum as well.
Okay. So to be fair, I guess, and in lieu of time, would you like to put that motion forward, Mr. Crouch? And I guess if staff is comfortable with it, really, I think the spirit is what we're trying to accomplish in the wording. As long as staff believes that it's fair, then we can.
So I guess what I would suggest is that in condition 1, the word summer be deleted. In condition 2, the word summer be deleted. And it states during the months of July and August and those dates that the Peel Board of Education does not schedule the opening of schools.
Excuse me, so can it be also the Dufferin Peel School Board?
Yeah.
Peel or separate school board?
Like okay.
Yeah, you don't want to limit the school board.
We're not doing this for snow days. I mean, other than that, both boards, don't they book the same schedules?
Sometimes they have different PA days. They don't have.
Well, then I would support either board.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Steiger?
To the chair, my suggestion would be that there just be like the frame be March to October, which was their request here. So, but during the periods of March,
spoke about Christmas break as well, and that's also not 1 week, and that's why I was concerned about the timing.
Sure, but then it's not going to be outdoors. I just want to.
It might well be. Okay. Particularly the global warming. Who knows in 4 years?
Yeah. So let's say exactly. So let's say. That'll be good. Okay.
So limiting. So again, I guess for Ms. Meyer's benefit and for the committee's benefit, are we indicating, staying with your motion, sir?
That's my motion. It's not second.
Okay. So the motion to be for both boards.
Both boards.
And is there a limited time frame on that?
During the months of July and August, or those dates that are not scheduled for school by either the separate school board or the public school board, have we dealt with the maximum students too? Did we not suggest that perhaps 20 students would be supportable in condition 3, plus 3 staff members? And then the deletion of summer in conditions 3, 4,
And 5.
and 5.
May I inquire, just to clarify, can we have the allowance of 5 staff members if needed, please? I didn't know if that was specified.
Or 3 or more, is that what you're
3
saying?
to 5 if possible,
Yeah.
just in case we have extra support.
Yeah.
And
I thought when we talked about it, you said you didn't need it.
Confident about it, but just in case. It's always good to have more if we need it.
have the option to at least have it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So Ms. Myers, are you?
So move.
So there's a motion put forward by Mr. Crouch. Is there a seconder to that motion?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I want to commend you on what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
It's tremendous.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would love to see you do more on the property.
Yeah, it's so.
My challenge, however, is I know that we've got summer in here, and this is for a temporary period of time.
Yes.
I would love to be able to make sure that in inclement weather, whether it's during the summer or any other time during the year, that the kids are properly taken care of. So it would be my suggestion that we stay with what there is, increase the number of staff to 5, number of students to 20, and allow the operation during professional development days.
Okay.
But I would be a little concerned that we take summer out of it right now. It may be summer and professional development days throughout the year, whatever term is best and appropriate. And once you're up and running, I think you'll understand how the operations are working, and then you might be able to expand on that.
I want to come back and show you what we've done to go to the next level. Because there is a next level.
Yes.
Believe me, there is a next level. Yeah. Thank you.
So I want to support you, but I'd also like to make sure that your growth is
absolutely
determined and progressive, as opposed to us just trying to give you everything, because I think we all want to support you.
Thank you. No, you are supported. No, this is good. This is good. Thank you.
Just for clarity though, I'm a little unclear. What would you like to be?
My concern was just that we take summer educational camp out of it. I think the basis of this proposal is that it's a summer educational camp. I think we're allowing an expansion by certainly offering parents the ability to take their children somewhere during professional development days, and that could be throughout the year. So summer does, the word summer does conflict a little bit with that, but I think if we try to expand this to include throughout the year, we're now trying to take on something that's a little bit beyond our capabilities.
And understanding where you're coming from, but speaking more to Mr. Crouch's point, is that I don't believe the spirit of it is to extend it into the winter months, other than for a finite period of time. The finite period of time being a PA day or a March break or something along those lines. So leaving it as, speaking to his motion of limiting it to those days that are not, no school is actually being offered, then you're able to at least have the option of using. Even that being said, a day in October, that may be a gorgeous summer day, but doesn't define, or is not defined by summer, right? So.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, the thing is, this is very possible. I can have it so then the students, only special needs students can come for the whole year. Then I would solicit the school boards, which this is what, no.
Well,
okay.
to be fair, and to what Ms. Stoffler was saying, is that starts changing the dynamics of what. So that would be something that you would have to then go back to staff and perhaps seek a change of use permit, and that may create a different set of circumstances that you may have to come back if that's something that you find that you want to do, that you would then have to go through the building department for that permit, and you may that may have another variance that is actually created. I'm not gonna speak to that because we don't know that, we're making
Okay.
assumptions, but I'm just speaking to what we have in front of us. So, understanding what Ms. Doffler said and her concern, I'm more in tune to where Mr. Crouch's mindset was. So if there are no other seconders, I would second his motion, and then we can deal with the motion at this time. And if there's any changes that any committee members would like to put forward, then we can deal with that as well. So I second Mr. Crouch's motion.
Just a comment, Chair. I do agree with Stoffler's comment, but at the same time, I understand and I respect the way Mr. Crouch has put forward the motion, and I'm inclined to support that as well.
Thank you.
So I'll just put forward the question.
Motion to abstain?
Yeah. So I second it. All in favor of the motion? That carries. That is approved. So,
Thanks. Okay, very happy.
just to be clear though,
Yes.
you are bound by these conditions.
Yeah.
And I think just to be prudent, we should go over them just so that you understand what you are agreeing to. So it is limited to a 3-year term at this
Yes.
point in time. We've just deleted the word summer, so that you have the option to use it sparingly. And the sparingly would be on days that there is no scheduled school days. And the maximum of 20 students to 5 staff members. And I believe that is all that we've changed, and just the deletion of summer in condition 5. But then the last condition is that failure to meet all those conditions or any of those conditions will nullify the actual
of course.
variance.
Yeah.
Okay, understand that, and you agree
Thank
to
you.
those? To those conditions?
Mr. Chair, by seeking clarification on condition number 2, are we still referencing the months of July and August, and we're including the verbiage about the 2 school boards not being in operation?
Correct, both school boards.
Okay.
July and August and those.
Yes, yes,
Neither school board has scheduled for us.
yes. I'm just confirming that we're not changing the months that are operated. It's sparingly used when the 2 school boards are.
First week of September would be there, last week.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
This will give us a foothold in what to do, and then we're gonna see you next year.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Calling application A19052, Jean Singh Nagra and Jaswinder Kaur Nagra. Property is located at 29 Sunpack Boulevard.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, it's Colin Chung of Glenshire Associates. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Ian Nagra and Jaswinder Nagra. The property is located at 29 Sunpack Boulevard. And Mr. Chairman, this is a renewal of a temporary variance application that is expiring. And the minor variance being sought is to enable the continued use of the temporary nature that's existing on site. There were a lot of site improvements that were done in the last few years to enable this temporary use. It is not the highest and best use on this site. We realize that. But it's the utilization site while looking and pursuing the highest and best use. There is a temporary office trailer that enables the temporary use to continue, and we're seeking a renewal of another 5 years, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions to the agent? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff have reviewed the application against the 4 tests as outlined in the Planning Act and are recommending approval subject to 3 conditions. Condition 1, that the variance be approved for a temporary period of 3 years. Condition 2, that there be no motor vehicle repair on the property at any time. And lastly, condition 3, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee will render the approval null and void.
Any questions by committee members to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. In other applications like this for storage and big land, we've also had provisions that there's no vehicle cleaning on the property. Would that be appropriate expansion to repair?
That is correct, yeah. We could add that as part of condition 2, that there be no motor vehicle repair or cleaning on the property at any time.
Mr. Chung, just to be clear that your applicant or your agent, I'm sorry, your client is not looking to have a cleaning, to be cleaning their trucks on that. Would that be satisfactory to your client as well?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess just as a comment, vehicle cleaning is a very all-encompassing term. You know, does that involve, for example, if a trucker wants to clean the window or, you know, the look of the vehicle? And I certainly don't want to be in a situation where they're doing the day-to-day activity to maintain the primary use and find that there's a defined term of cleaning that catches this particular variance to be null and void. It's a very difficult definition, cleaning. I mean, you know, how do you determine what's cleaning and what's not cleaning on the trucks? I know that the purpose of having those conditions is to ensure that the applicant or the tenant or the owner doesn't do other business other than the primary vehicle, truck, you know, storage. But again, I'll leave it to your discretion. I don't have a problem with the condition. I just don't know how it's going to be enforced one day. And sometimes each enforcement officer have a different definition of cleaning, and I've gotten into that situation before with the city.
So, Mr. Crouch, perhaps?
I'd be happy to limit it to truck and trailer washing. Would that be preferable to you, Mr. Chung?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chairman.
Through you, Mr. Chair, how this condition is going to be read, if I can get some clarity on it?
I'd like to just read the condition.
Oh,
really
that there be no motor vehicle repair nor vehicle and trailer washing on the property at any time.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the staff is washing. Oftentimes we do include the conditions that strictly washing is not allowed. Is that something, are we okay?
And typically, vehicle washing equates to vehicle cleaning. We're obviously dealing with, you know, maintenance and in cleaning out the interior, maybe, you know, and certainly window washing. If you're just cleaning the window because you've been on the road for some time and you need some visibility, that's not seen as vehicle washing. But truck and trailer washing is the defined term, or motor vehicle washing establishment is the defined term, and implies that you're washing the body of the vehicle, as well as, you know, you have an operation exclusively devoted to the detailing of the interior of the vehicle. But individual owners just maintaining their own vehicle would not be an issue and could take place on this site with the condition as amended.
Okay. And then speaking to, I guess, there's a discrepancy obviously of what staff's recommendation and what's being sought, the 3-year term, and I know staff is, I guess, clamping down on that. Is there a rationale on that, just other than to see how things progress?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, we feel that the temporary period is more appropriate just to more closely monitor the site to ensure that it's maintained in accordance with the approved landscape plan and site plan. Also, our policy group is looking to initiate an exercise and establish a policy framework to identify appropriate locations for temporary truck and trailer storage. So in the event that there's new policy framework in place and after a 3-year temporary approval, it may be more appropriate that we redirect the applicant or owner to one of those sites that are identified by our policy group rather than extend permissions for an additional temporary period.
The only difficulty in dealing with businesses, when you shorten the term, obviously the expenses are increased as well. So I guess I just leave it to the discretion of committee how would you like to deal with that. So the only alteration at this point in time suggested by Mr. Crouch would be the nor truck and trailer washing aspect. And if there are any other comments or concerns, then we'll leave it at committee.
Through you, Chair, I support Mr. Crouch's suggestion.
Okay. And the term of 3 years as opposed to 5? Is committee comfortable with the 3, or is there any other suggestions on that?
I'm content with 3. I think the highest and best uses have to be promoted in this city.
Okay. So if there are no further comments, seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to proceed with, in accordance with the staff report with my proposed amendment.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Mr. Nurse. And just before we proceed, Mr. Chung, you're okay with the conditions as stated? They are acceptable to you?
Yes, they are, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All in favor? That carries. This is approved for the 3-year term.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, with the amended condition.
Calling application A19-053, Ravi Karan and Ravneet Sandhu. Property is located at 160 Prairie Rose Circle.
Mr. Chair, staff, members, Madam Secretary. My name is Gurmeet Sandhu and I'm representing my parents Sandhu and Ravneet Sandhu.
Okay. Anything else you wishes to add?
We're requesting a variance to allow below grade entrance between the property line and the main wall of the house where the bylaw does not permit.
Okay, sure. Committee members, any questions to the property owner at this point? Seeing none. Anyone in the audience wishes to speak on this application? None. Staff, could you please weigh in your comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff reviewed the application and are recommending approval subject to 3 conditions. Condition 1, that the owner maintains the general location of the existing wood board fence to ensure that the below-grade entrance in the exterior side yard remains entirely screened from public view. Condition 2, that the below-grade entrance shall not be used for the purpose of accessing an unregistered second unit. And lastly, Condition 3, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Sir, do you agree and understand those conditions?
Yes.
And Mr. Freeman, I'm just looking at my notes, and I apologize, I just stepped away. You've added another condition from the original. Oh, my apologies, I'm looking at a different one. Okay, perfect, sorry. So the 3 conditions, number 2, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you understand those conditions and agree to them?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to approve with the conditions.
Seconder? Ms. Stoffler, all in favor? That carries, that is approved, sir.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I can get Mr. Sandhu to spell his first name for me, please.
Gurmeet, Kulmeet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Calling application A19-054, Gurjit Singh and Sandeep Singh. Property is located at 15 Colchester Avenue.
Good morning all again. My name is Gurmeet Sandhu and representing Gurjit Singh, Sandeep Singh, 15 Colchester Avenue. And we are requesting a minor variance to permit interior side yards.
Through you, Mr. Chair, before we go any further, we don't have Mr. Sandhu listed as the agent on
From
these.
Noble Elect System, ma'am.
Fine, thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, just for clarity, just for clerical issues. Proceed.
So we're asking for a minor variance. The setback requirement of 1.2, we are short by 1 inch, 1.1 meters. We're asking for that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, committee members, to the agent? Seeing none at this time. Anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none. Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff reviewed the application and find it to be supportable, subject to 2 conditions of approval. Condition number 1, that the owner provide a side yard drainage design that ensures that the drainage from the applicant's side yard follows the approved drainage design for the property and is unobstructed by the proposed above-grade entrance. The side yard drainage design must demonstrate that drainage is contained within the limits of the subject property and does not impact the adjacent property. The owner shall obtain written approval to this effect to the satisfaction of the Director of Environmental and Development Engineering within 60 days from the date of the decision of the committee. And lastly, condition 2, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee will render the approval null and void.
Thank you. And this is where my comment was coming last time. So, sir, this, are they seeking to, is this being rented out? Are they looking to have an accessory apartment put in this location?
It hasn't been decided yet.
Okay, so I just would like or ask staff if the condition that reads that the above grade entrance shall not be used for the purpose of an accessory unregistered secondary unit would be a prudent addition to that?
Agreed through you, Mr. Chair. That would certainly be my recommendation. And in addition, it should also note that it cannot be used for an unregistered or a registered secondary unit because it does not meet the minimum 1.2 meter path of travel that would be required, even if the unit in the below grade, in the basement, were to be registered.
So even if they were to register, they would have to seek an alternative location for
Correct,
entrance?
for their principal entrance.
So understanding that, sir, are you okay with those conditions?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
So we are looking at adding 2 additional conditions. Ms. Corazzola, can you just read them just for?
So now I was proposing just to simply modify your one additional condition, and that would be that, that the side entrance shall not be used for the purpose of accessing an unregistered second unit or as the principal entrance to a registered second unit.
So you understand and agree to those?
Yes.
Okay. Seeking a motion to proceed?
Just to add that if they decide to go ahead with the second dwelling unit, this will be used as an egress.
That's right, because it does not meet the actual,
Yes.
for an accessory unit, principal entrance. Seeking a motion to proceed if there are no further comments or questions.
Motion to table with amended conditions.
By Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Calling application A19055, Bindu Gore. The property is located at number 2 Noble Place.
Good morning, again. My name is Gurmeet Sandhu from Noble Light Solutions, representing Bindu Gore, 2 Noble Place, Brampton. We're seeking minor variance to allow to have below grade entrance where it is right now by following some of the recommendations that came from the staff.
Sorry,
Didn't hear you. Does the last part of your comments, sir?
We're requesting a minor variance to permit a below grade entrance to be located between the main wall of dwelling and the property line, whereas bylaw does not allow for the variance.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by committee members to the agent? Seeing none. Anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none. Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff reviewed the application against the 4 tests outlined in the Planning Act and recommending approval subject to 5 conditions. Condition 1, that the owner obtain a building permit for the below grade entrance within 60 days from the date of the decision of the committee. Condition 2, that the owner remove the existing canopy roof structure covering the existing below grade entrance within 60 days from the date of the decision of the committee. Condition 3, that the owner maintains the general location of the existing woodboard fence to ensure that the below grade entrance and the exterior side yards is entirely screened from public view. Condition 4, that the below grade entrance shall not be used for the purpose of accessing an unregistered second unit. And lastly, failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Sir, you've read those conditions and understand and agree to them?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Seeking a motion to proceed if there are no further questions or comments.
Motion to approve.
By Ms. Stoffler, seconded by Mr. Crouch. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Calling application A19056, Mahan Singh. Property is located at 81 Morton Way.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, again. members, staff, Madam Secretary, audience. My name is Kulmeet Sandhu from Noble Light Solutions, representing Mahan Singh, 81 Morton Way, Brampton. I should have, come forward when you asked for deferrals, but I was just waiting for a text message from customer, wanted to know what they really wanted to do about it. They are seeking deferral on this application, if possible.
Fine. Period, sir, or?
What is your?
90 days.
Okay. Committee, how would we like to deal with the, I guess, request? We do have, I will add, just for the record, we do have 2 letters of objection. And I guess I will ask staff, how would we like to deal with, what's your recommendation on the deferral request?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would prefer to proceed with the report. We've written the report. I don't see anything changing in 3 months' time to get to something that we can both agree on. So I would prefer to proceed with the report.
Okay, is there a rationale for your deferral request, sir?
We need to do some more due diligence before we accept that. We know that where the staircase is, it's not meeting the minimum requirements, but it's just that we just need to do more research on it.
Okay.
To see if 90 days seems a lot, maybe we can go 60 days if possible.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the agent, are you willing to, or the property owner is considering some modification during this time or proposing some changes when coming back after 60 or 90 days?
They're going through some family things and we don't know what they really want to do. But again, if we have some time, then we can, bring forward all those changes.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. Staff report indicates that the entrance appears to encroach on the neighbor's property. Is there a survey that's available? Do we know whether this is in fact a reality or a perception?
Well, through you, Mr. Chairman, in doing the numbers, I've measured it. The applicant's drawing indicates that the steps are, first of all, the building code requires a step to be 34 inches wide. The applicant's drawing indicates that it's 33. My measurement was 32 and a half or 32. So it does not meet the building code requirement from the side of the house to where the retaining wall goes up. Then you measure the actual retaining wall 3 inches. You're supposed to have 0.9 meters to the side. So when you add it up, you're probably about 1.5 inches encroaching onto the neighbor's property. And so it is pushed over. In a couple of months' time, you cannot adjust the step to make it all of a sudden conform unless you start dredging into the wall or you open up the side of the house to increase the width of the step. So neither of which I think can really be done at this time.
Thank you.
So I leave it again at the indulgence of committee. How would we like to deal with the deferral request?
Chair, I would support the deferral request, but I would like to check the exact timing of the committee hearing roughly around 3 months from now, and then I'll support that.
Mr. Crouch?
Chair, I can't support a deferral on this. If safety is an issue, we shouldn't be perpetuating an unsafe situation, period.
Motion will be, I'll deal with the motion that's been tabled first, if we get a seconder. And I guess for clarity, Ms. Myers, would that be approximately, what was the time frame you were looking at?
Whatever the meeting between 60 to 90 days.
Through Mr. Chair, 60 days would take us to June 18th hearing date, and following that, 90 days would likely be towards the end of July, which will be July 30th.
Okay.
Just,
Mr. Duffer, sir?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a question to staff. Is there an order to comply on the property?
Yes, there is.
And do we know how long it's been in place?
It has been in place at least since 2018, so several months already. I'm not certain whether it has proceeded to prosecution, but there's certainly an order to comply in place.
And may I ask of the applicant, are the current property owners, did they purchase the property with this in place?
not too sure about that.
Okay. Is there something that you can provide to follow through in your request for deferral? Because this becomes a bit of a challenge for us to understand why there would be a deferral.
Okay.
Have there been conversations with staff? I mean, we recognize that apparently there is an issue with the dimensions for the steps. But you've presented your other few cases very well, so I just wondered what would be the reason? Is there something that we could support a deferral for if we're given the facts that we have in hand, as we do?
We can certainly provide more information, but we need some time.
Is there a survey on the property?
Yes, ma'am.
Would we be able to get a copy of the survey and understand exactly what the dimensions are? I've been to the site twice, and visually it doesn't appear that it's near the property line, but this becomes a complication because if we don't have a survey, if we don't understand where the actual line is, that would be one of the...
That's why we just wanted some time so that we could...
I can confirm through you, Mr. Chair, that we do have a copy of the survey. There is exactly 0.9 meters of side yard between the wall of the building and the side lot line, which is just about 3 feet, so 0.9 meters. Unless, as Mr. Nicky Fortune had indicated, unless the wall is recessed into the side of the building, they will not be able to construct a code-compliant stairway in this side yard without encroaching onto the neighbor's property, which would then necessitate that the neighboring property get a variance for a reduction in side yard setback, because you'll have a structure, the retaining wall essentially built right across the property line. To meet the minimum building code requirements, a 0.9 meter side yard for a below-grade entrance is not sufficient. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I understand Mr. Crouch's concern given the fact I believe since this is the first deferral request, so I'm in support of deferring this to the month of June's meeting.
Okay. Do we have a seconder on that? I'll second that, just for the sheer fact of it seems that the agent has just taken on this file and doesn't really have, and respectfully, an understanding of all the details. So I think this is an opportunity to understand if this is even worth proceeding, or a withdrawal maybe. And again, I don't want to speculate on that. That would be something that I think would necessitate, from my perspective, or help justify the deferral request at this point in time. So I'll support the deferral request. So to the June...
Ms. Myers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the meeting scheduled for June would be June the 18th.
June the 18th meeting. So call the question. All in favor? So that is deferred to the June 18th meeting. So I would highlight, sir, that this is your opportunity to get some clarity from staff on exactly some of the issues that are facing on this application. Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Calling application A19057, Mesjid Mooney and Mary Najka. Property is located at 34 Glen Manor Drive.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, council members, and all the staff and the other members here. My name is Meshach Muniu. I would like to correct the spelling there on my first name. It's Meshachak. I'm here on behalf of I and my wife. We are requesting for minor variance on 2 issues. Last year we applied to legalize our basement and to have a second dwelling, which was permitted, and the construction has been done. We are done inside. With only the outside, we couldn't have continued because of the weather. And I know some of the conditions which I received were due to the weather, because the work which was done outside, the debris was put on our backyard, and we had a full trailer in front, and which already has been moved, and the debris outside has been moved. And the sand which was excavated from the undergrade preparation is still sitting there because it was frozen. But when the weather improves, maybe in another week, we will move that. So our request is to be allowed to put a roof on the undergrade stairs, so that at least when we put a tenant there, there will be a roof to protect from the snow. And the other one is when we were doing this project, we thought that we can increase our kitchen a little bit. I know I have already in the committee here, and you know, when I already have a bigger kitchen, you have a happy home. So that's why we are requesting for to increase the kitchen a little bit to have more space. And that's all our request this morning.
Thank you, sir. Any questions by committee members to the owner, the applicant? Seeing none at this time. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application?
I had my neighbors here to support me, but they left because of time. They thought it was at 9.
That's fine. If they want to speak, or if they come in.
They were just coming to support me.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you may notice this report's structured a little differently. Typically, we write Committee of Adjustment reports based on the 4 tests under Section 45(1) of the Planning Act. In this case, because we're dealing with illegal non-conforming use, we're also looking at Sections 45.2 of the Planning Act, the powers of the Committee of Adjustment to review minor variance applications as it relates to requests for an enlargement or extension of non-conforming uses. So we start off with under 45.2 of the Act. There's a number of tests that are looked at, and staff is satisfied that the 1-story rear yard addition and the exterior below-grade stairs with this associated covered canopy will not unduly aggravate the current situation and is considered to be reasonable. With regard, and that's for the non-conforming use itself. And now, with regard to the other variances to the side and to the rear property lines under the Section 45.1 of the 4 tests, staff is satisfied that a 1-story rear yard addition will continue to have sufficient space in the rear yard for an outside amenity. Staff is satisfied that the proposed side yard setbacks, which are greater than what is currently provided for on the house, are going to continue to be reasonable and maintain the 4 tests. So staff are supporting the requested variances subject to the following 5 conditions. First, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice and generally in accordance with the elevations as attached here to as Appendix 1. Second, that a building permit shall be obtained within 60 days of the decision of approval for rear addition to the house and the exterior below-grade entrance stairs. Third, that the owner make arrangements satisfactory to the Director of Development Services to remove the outside storage of building and construction materials in the rear yard within 60 days of the decision of approval, or as extended at the direction of the Director of Development Services upon receipt of a written request for extension from the owner. Fourth, that drainage from the new building addition and the roof canopy over the exterior below-grade stairs shall flow on the owner's property and the drainage on the adjacent properties not be adversely affected. And lastly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Sir, have you had an opportunity to review those conditions?
Yes.
And you understand and agree to them?
Yes.
Okay. And just for clarity, Mr. Nicky Fortune, I'm just looking at the original variance. So this was built as a legal non-conforming, because I'm reading a townhouse here.
That is correct, and I was not able to get to the bottom of, was there an earlier, very late Committee of Adjustment that allowed the use? We couldn't find up until now why they were permitted to build, and it's not just this house, it's the 2 houses beside it too that were granted the same status that were zoned in for townhouses, and yet singles were built.
Because on the site visit, I was extremely confused and I thought I was at the wrong place. But just for clarity, that's one of the reasons that variance is there.
Correct.
Okay. So if there are no further questions or comments, seeking a motion to proceed.
So Chair, should I sue the city for allowing us?
Didn't want to open up that can of worms, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
By Mr. Crouch.
Seconded.
Seconded by Mr. Chada. All in favor? That is approved, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I can confirm one more time the correct spelling of the speaker's name, because I have different variations on the application.
Just your again, just to confirm the
first
spelling of your name, just for the record, sir.
Yeah, my first name is spelled MESHACK.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I'm just confirming that because on the application it's spelled MESHACKN. So we have two different variations, this is why I'm
Okay.
asking.
And
And our
then
tax
also
roll
on-
shows something completely different.
So we're
Thank
clear
you.
now, Mr. Mayor? Is that-
you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much.
Calling application A19059, Shada Figliomi, Many. The property is 49 Inder Heights Drive.
Good morning, my name is Anthony Figliomeni. We're just here asking for an extension of the overhang, small portion of the roof on the cabana. It's already been constructed.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by committee members to the applicant? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The application was previously before committee, and at that time it was approved for 26.86 square meters. And it was the base of the building, the walls were constructed in accordance with what was requested. However, the roof portion juts out further in front of the building, maybe it's for shading, whatever, but anyways, it was constructed not in accordance with the plans, and therefore by recalculating it, the structure has now gotten bigger, which is why the applicant is back. So it goes from what was approved at 26.8 square meters, is now up to 33.36 square meters as a result of the roof being constructed a little bit jutting out further in front of the building. So staff is supportive of the application, continues to be supportive of the application, given that the base is not going to change of the building, and subject to the following four conditions: that drainage from the accessory building shall flow onto the applicant's property, and drainage on adjacent property shall not be adversely affected. Second, that a building permit shall be obtained within 60 days from the committee's decision for the roof of the existing accessory structure building. Third, that the accessory building shall be constructed generally in accordance with the plan attached hereto as Appendix 1. Last, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee will render the approval null and void.
Thank you. Quick question to applicant and staff. Obviously, or I assume a building permit was obtained when building the actual
Yes.
cabana.
Mhm.
Would that permit be closed, or would it still not be open?
It's still open.
And it will need to be amended somewhat to
And
get it corrected.
that's really what I'm getting at, perhaps a building permit or an amendment to the existing building, just for clarity, because I wouldn't want him or the applicant to have an additional permit if it's already there, and we can actually do it through the right process.
That is fair to say. So you can say that a building permit / amended building permit?
And/or amended.
And/or amended
Yeah.
building permit.
Committee members, is that fair enough?
We'd be going for a revision on the roof. We'd
Sorry?
be going for a revision on the roof.
And that's that's the process I was assuming, but I didn't want to make that assumption. Okay, so if no other comments, sir, you understand and agree to those conditions? We've just amended the condition 2, just to say that in the event that the permit is still open, an amendment would be satisfactory as well. And you're
still an appeal period? Do I have to still wait the appeal period to get the building permit?
Just for clarity?
Yes,
Yeah.
through you, there's a 20-day appeal period. The application, however, can be submitted for the revision. At this time, I don't see anyone in objection to it here at the committee today. That would be one of the prerequisites, but we can certainly take the application in. However, the permit can't be issued until 20 days.
Okay. If there are no further comments, seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to approve with the amendment to item number 2.
Okay, by Ms. Stoffler, seconded by Mr. Crouch. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just gonna call for a brief recess, 5-minute recess.
If that's okay.
So, we'll be come back from 11.
Yeah, 11:05, we'll convene. Sign that. That's okay. Okay, we'll reconvene.
Calling applications A19-061 and A19-062, Lakeview Homes Mavis Steels Inc., 2 properties, one located on Moffett Avenue and one located on Hendricks Crescent.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, staff, and the public. My name is Andrew Walker, and I'm a principal planner with Gagnon Walker Domes. I'm here today on behalf of Lakeview Homes Mavis Steels, the registered owner of lots 46 and 53 on registered plan 43M-2064. These are lots on an approved draft plan of subdivision 21T-15001B, which was draft approved on April 28, 2017. The corresponding zoning bylaw was approved on November 8, 2017, and the draft plan was registered on December 12, 2018. Lot 46 currently hasn't been assigned a municipal address, so it's noted as 0 Moffett Avenue, but it's at the southeast corner of the western intersection of Hendricks Crescent and Moffett Avenue, and has a frontage of about 15.68 meters. Lot 53 is identified as 21 Hendricks Crescent, and it's at the northeast corner of the westerly curve of Hendricks Crescent south of Moffett. It's a corner lot, but it's on the same street as the Crescent, so that's the best way I think I could describe that particular lot. The variances that are being sought for both properties, and they're both corner lots, is to permit a maximum interior garage width of 55% for lot 46 and 56% for lot 53, whereas the zoning bylaw permits a maximum interior garage width of 50%. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions by committee members to the agent? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? These applications? Seeing none. Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The garage, what we're dealing with is the garage does not have maximum door width, just the maximum interior garage width for whatever reason. So this is what we're looking at. So interior and exterior, it's going to be visible from the street. The intent of the bylaw is to minimize the visual impact of the garage doors at the front of the house to maintain a positive streetscape view. And it's noted that corner lots will typically require upgraded treatments given their prominent view from the street. And it is recommended that the city's urban design section, in conjunction with the subdivision control architect, prepare final elevation drawings for this lot, or both these lots, which provides an appropriate design treatment. So, although staff, I looked at it, looks fine, but let's get the experts look at it, the urban design people, in conjunction with the control architect, and it appears to be fine. It's only a couple of lots on this large plan of subdivision within this area. So staff is satisfied that the requested variance maintains the 4 tests and are proposing the following 2 conditions: that the owner shall make arrangements satisfactory to the manager of urban design to obtain approval from the control architect for upgraded architectural design treatment of this corner lot in accordance with the architectural control guidelines for this plan of subdivision. Approval shall be obtained within 90 days of the decision of approval or as extended at the discretion of the Director of Development Services upon receipt of a written request for extension from the owner. Secondly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you had an opportunity to review those conditions. They are acceptable to you?
They are acceptable, yes.
Okay. Yeah. I'd just like to actually ask staff, I always think it's a good idea generally to include the clause that if these lots have been sold, perhaps then the purchaser acknowledges that, and if they haven't been sold, then an acknowledgement form. Whatever wording that we typically use, I think that would be just prudent to include.
Makes sense to me, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it does.
Okay. Committee members, we're okay with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a comment. If we are adding generally, that might not going to affect it. They're building something different showing rather than step. Looks slightly different as we have seen in the last meeting. There was a side entrance door was missing, and then they had to come back, and those.
Okay, I'm just trying to follow. Are you looking at a word somewhere in the conditions? Oh, okay, you did what I did. This is, we're on a different one here. So it's just the two conditions that were put forward by staff, and I've just asked to include a third condition.
Yeah.
And you're okay with that as well?
Yeah, it's my understanding that they've been sold, but I mean, I've been at committee meetings before, and I've seen that as a standard condition. So that.
And I just think it's prudent to include for just, you know, perhaps.
Right, correct. That should be an issue.
Our lawyer friend can speak to that, but just that it's just acknowledged that there has been changes made.
Correct. Correct.
And staff, you're okay with that?
I don't recall saying buy or read or.
I didn't want to open up that can of worms as well. So, that being said, if there are no further comments or questions, seeking a motion to proceed. Motion to proceed with the amended conditions by Mr. Nurse, seconded by Ms. Toffler. All in favor? Those carry. They are approved, sir.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Calling application A19-062, Audubon Freight Holdings, Inc., properties located at 27 Automatic Road.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, it's Colin Chung, Glenn Schnarr and Associates, Inc. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Audubon Freight Holdings, Inc. They own their existing industrial property at 27 Automatic Road. Mr. Chairman, this is an application that's a renewal of a previous Committee of Adjustment approved variances. The application was filed for a permanent use. The site's been operating efficiently without any complaints from surrounding industries or neighbors. And we think that this is a complement to the existing main industrial use to the site. And we're seeking a permanent permission for these variances that were sought temporary basis in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions by committee members to the agent? Seeing none at this time. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none. Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is largely policy-driven, the report content, in that the official plan and the secondary plan both state that the industrial land shall be predominantly used for industry, but will not prevent some of the land from being used for other than industrial purposes, provided that the uses do not serve uses within another land use classification. Our policy section is looking towards consolidating this secondary plan and the others in the area because they're somewhat old. We understand that both the city and the region need to update their official plan and secondary plan documents by 2021 in order to conform and comply with the Growth Plan 2017 policies. And we want to ensure that we protect the industrial uses in the area there. What we had, this has been a lot of, along, let's say here, there's, back in 2004, originally variances were granted to allow for a trucking terminal on these lands and a motor vehicle repair as well. Subsequently, additional uses have since been requested on a permanent basis. Staff says, no, just 5 years. We want to look and see how things are working, and things appear to be working fine. But we're asking for one more additional use. We still believe it's working fine, but we want to ensure that the industrial trucking terminal is a primary use, and you can have these other uses on site operating in conjunction with these uses, fine. But we want to double check what our policies are going to be in a couple of years down the line. So there's opportunity. We will be consulting with stakeholders to ensure that we understand whether it's appropriate or not to have certain retail or commercial uses in this location, maybe to put some restrictions on, but we haven't done that detailed work yet. And in discussions with Glenn Schnarr's office. I've gone over the conditions with the agent, and they were deemed to be acceptable, so I'll read that we are supporting the application subject to the following 6 conditions: that the requested uses be permitted for a temporary period of 3 years from the date of the committee's decision. Second, that the requested uses shall only be permitted to operate in conjunction with a truck terminal use operation on the subject lands. Third, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. Fourth, that variance number 4 for the tire sales and parts storage use shall only be permitted within the enclosed portion of the primary building as shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. Fifth, that the owner shall make arrangements satisfactory to the Director of Development Services to submit a site plan application for the tire sales and parts storage expansion within 60 days of the committee decision, and the site plan shall be approved and implemented within 180 days of the date of the committee's decision, or within an extended period of time as approved by the Director of Development Services. And lastly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you so much. Staff, committee, any questions for staff? So you've had an opportunity to review those conditions, sir?
Yes, I did.
So we have,
Thank you,
I guess, 6 conditions before us. Do you agree and accept those conditions?
If I may have a little bit of time just to speak to these conditions, Mr. Chairman. The first one I spoke to earlier, the application was filed for a permanent variance, and staff are recommending 3 years. And you'll recall on my previous SUMPAC application, I've accepted the 3 years because I know that the owner and the tenant can arrange for a 3-year lease agreement. In this particular case, the reason why we filed that permanent because the tenant and operator of these uses are looking for something more, I guess, certain. And I'm not here to debate the permanence versus staff's recommended temporary, but I think 3 years on this site, because of the nature of investment that the tenant needs to make on the operation, I think it's going to cause some consolation in terms of negotiations. So with your indulgence, if the committee wishes to establish some temporary nature to this variance sought, I think it's more appropriate to actually establish something between 4 and 5 years so that there's some sufficient ability to negotiate between the owner and the tenant. I think 3 years is going to be a little tight to actually make that investment and commitment. So I'll leave that to you on that condition number 1. Like the previous application on Daniels Corporation, we talked about staff recommending a condition that ties to a sketch in the public notice. And sometimes the condition number 5 speaks to a site plan application to be submitted and processed. And as you know, Mr. Chairman, through site plan application, things get tweaked, things get refined. And to tie something to a sketch, and I'd like the committee's indulgence on the previous application, having some flexibility with a word generally. So I'm just now taking ownership of committee's implementation of a previous application.
Yours to have, sir.
If I may. So I think in terms of anywhere where it speaks to, for example, that the extent of the variance be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice, which is a condition number 3, if we can throw a word generally in there so that there's some flexibility. I think it's the same thing with condition number 4. That way, I think condition number 5, dealing with the site plan application process, gives some confidence and clarity to both the city and the applicant, that we don't have to come back to you because there's minor refinement to a sketch in a public notice. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, I'm in your hands. I think staff are commended and did a great job of looking at this application. They have their opinion, I have mine, but I'm prepared to accept the committee's decision on this.
Okay. Mr. Crouch?
Through you to the applicant. You know, Mr. Chung, you say, well, let's put generally in accordance with the sketch. But in this case, we have existing truck sale area, existing motor vehicle area, existing tire sales and part storage, and existing truck sales. So what difference is going to be made? Or what should I be worried about?
Yeah, part of the application before you, I think staff mentioned that there's an additional variance about tire sales and part storage. And one of the things that the owner is looking to explore with is these shipping containers. Now today, as you know, the shipping containers are being retrofitted for alternative uses. And as part of the site plan application, that's been required as a condition, we intend to demonstrate to staff how to utilize shipping containers as a way of keeping some really orderly, clean storage area for motor vehicle use. And as a result of that, things may get shifted on the exterior of the site, and I just want to make sure that we have precaution to that. And I don't want to come back to the committee for something that staff supports because it implements something that's clean and visually pleasant to the site, but having to get caught on a condition that's approved by the committee.
Could I hear from staff on that proposal, please?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. The existing tire sales and storage is existing. It's there. That's what they asked for. I support that. I just didn't want to expand because they dropped a few containers there and built this storage area. So to limit it, and I was okay to say generally in this circumstance, knowing that they are going to go through site plan approval and review for that. Adding items, the word like generally, because you're going to ask for outdoor storage of truck sales, I want to keep that generally where it's located there. I guess you're limited by the driveway location and how much you could expand to, but I wouldn't want to give too much leeway onto how much storage of view the truck sales would be in the front of the property. So generally is okay, somewhat. I'm not too concerned at this point.
Speaking to, I guess, I tend to agree. The only, I guess, solace that I take is the fact that the site plan is there. So if there are small alterations that ultimately staff believe are required, there's going to be a duty from the applicant to meet those requirements at site plan. I like the philosophy of generally for the sheer fact of not having to come back for a 12 centimeter change that may occur, that a wall is blown out or something of those sorts. So appreciating where Mr. Crouch comes, and that was my thought process too when it was existing. There's not much leeway, but I think the scale of this property, things can. Yep, Mr. Steiger.
Just perhaps as an added suggestion is that. With regard to the existing parts sales and storage, that facility, it may be as part of a site plan that may actually get relocated, so maybe the wording ought to be modified partially to exclude that, so that it would be that the extent of the variances for 1, 2, and 4 be generally limited, so that that's not tied to the 1, 2, and 3, so that's not tied to number 4, so that if there's any shifting of that use itself, that can be accommodated through the site plan process.
I didn't understand exactly.
You're saying?
So the site plan process speaks, the requirement would be to deal with the outdoor, or the tire storage, the containers. So as part of that process, it may be that there might be better behind the building or something like that.
Right.
The applicant may be agreeable to that, I don't know, but to allow that opportunity, the suggestion is that condition number 3 be modified to say that the extent of the variances number 1, 2, and 3 be generally limited to that shown on the sketch, so that restriction doesn't then fall in relation to the variance 4, which relates to the parts storage, so that there may be some opportunity, if possible, to shift that around.
So would 4 then be eliminated entirely?
No,
If I
it's
may.
just the restriction on 4, sir.
Sorry, and I think the restriction on 4 is some of the condition will be removed. So the condition, if I'm understanding Mr. Steiger, that variance 4 for the tire sales and part storage use shall only be permitted within an enclosed portion of the primary building, period.
And I am good with that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Just changing it out to A.
Taking
Sorry,
off the
and
sketch of
taking
that.
off any reference to the location of the tire storage that's shown on the sketch as it exists today. So variances 1, 2, and 3 are tied to the sketch. Variance 4, since it's a use that's going to be determined the appropriate location through site plan, can simply be that it's the condition be an enclosed building.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think the Manager Steiger and Manager Corzola's suggestion on the staff can recommend the condition 3 and 4 I think what it does is separates the existing permission, existing uses to be generally located within the sketched in the public notice, which is okay. And the new use, which is the storage of tire sales and parts storage use, which can be subject to site plan approval because condition 5 states it. I think that now cleans up the current use versus and minor flexibility to that versus a site plan process that may dictate tire storage in a completely different location than what's in the sketch in the public notice, and I'm satisfied with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess lastly but not least is the request for the 5-year as opposed to 3-year suggestion from staff. Staff, I know we were speaking to that, and the philosophy, Mr. Nick Fortune, is that there may be changes. I guess from my perspective, being a business owner and understanding terms of leases and things along those lines, a 5-year lease, that if that's going to be, I don't think there's a big enough difference that will alter this as an existing, granted that the tire location will be new, potentially, but I would support the 5-year in this case, particularly for the fact that it's an ongoing business and there's going to be significant costs associated to perform or to actually build this facility as well. So that would be my take on it, but again, I leave it to the indulgence of committee if there's any other concerns or any comments to that. Mr. Chano.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I support the 5 years. Having said that, this facility is very well operated there, and I can see they are doing well, so I am inclined to support the 5 years and the rest of the arguments.
Okay. So that being said, if there are no further comments, if staff would like to weigh in on that, please do so.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we had that discussion, what could we support? 3 seemed to be the number that was consensus amongst our department, and I'm hearing what you said, and I respect that. And so one thing is that we're expecting that in 3 years' time, the get our policies, that might even extend further slightly as well. It's just what our understanding is today, so sure. I have nothing further to offer to that.
Okay, thank you. So I guess if there are no comments, then I'll leave it for committee to put forward a motion. From what I understand, just for, again, for the benefit of Ms. Myers, and correct me, staff, then in condition 3, it will read conditions 1 and 2 generally.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, that the extent of variances 1, 2, and 3 be limited to that generally shown on the sketch attached to the public notice.
Okay, and I'm just questioning why 3 would be there, because 3 is just speaking to 1 and 2.
Oh, no, I think, Mr. Chairman,
sorry.
Ms. Corzola is speaking to the request for variance number 1, 2, and 3 in the application, not the condition by staff.
Apologies.
Yeah. I did the same thing, I think. But
I was going back, I'm like, why are we going to put a condition for a
My
condition?
apologies, that's correct, yes.
Okay, I understand. And then condition 4 would just read as is with the elimination of after primary building, correct?
Correct.
It also was to be amended to and instead of the before enclosed.
So where, Mr. Crouch?
Shall only be permitted with an enclosed portion of the primary building instead of the enclosed portion of the primary building.
Okay. So then seeking a motion to proceed from committee.
Motion to approve.
Have we also changed to 5 years?
Well, that would be the motion. Someone would have to speak to that if we are maintaining as is, or if the condition for 5 years is in the motion.
Yes, Chair, I support, and I would like to put forward the motion. The first to be read instead of 3 years to 5, and 3, the third one read the variance 1, 2, and 3 as amended by the staff's wording, and that's my motion.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Ms. Doffler. All in favor? That carries. That is approved with the amended.
Thank you, Mr.
conditions.
Chairman.
Thank you.
recalling application A17-175, Royal Empire Group, Inc. Property is located at 5923 Mayfield Road.
Morning, sir. So once again, asking for deferral. I just moved into the property. I work in Brampton. I have business in Brampton. My children are raised in Brampton as well. We want to change one of the things is I want to change the purpose of the application and move a trucking yard to construction, storage, and usage. I myself has got a small business, a couple of construction equipment. And for that reason, I'm asking for a sufficient amount of time to hire proper consultants and amend the application for the use and purpose.
So the request was sought. I guess at this point in time, we've included the fact of potentially altering the submission and the variances. I leave it to the discretion of committee if there are any questions or any other comments. Speaking to the actual variance that we have at this point in time, we're looking at 4 variances as have been put forward. So you're seeking to actually amend or add to these variances, sir?
Well, remove some of them, the trucking part and that, which is a major impact on the road there and that, and to change the purpose to construction storage. So there won't be that much vehicles coming in and out. It'd be the odd one to move the equipment out to the appropriate sites. I do have a customer that is building Mayfield Road that was interested in storing all their the pylons and signs and everything. So there wouldn't be a significant amount of truck traffic. It'd be just their the stuff that is required, the signs and barriers and all that.
Yep, understood. And again, I leave it to the indulgence of committee. Any questions, committee members, to the applicant?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a question to staff. The request for this change, does this create a whole different variance?
How it's been described by the applicant, it sounds like it's similar in nature to what's being currently sought under this variance application. With that said, staff would need an opportunity to review the extent of the implications that may potentially arise from the type of use being described by the applicant. We're in a position to proceed with the variance that's before us today. We've done a comprehensive review of an evaluation of these 4 variances, but anything beyond that or any modification to any of the variances would have to be considered by staff.
And through you, Mr. Chair, if I might raise a point of clarification. There was a request for deferral put forward earlier at the hearing. It was the decision of the committee not to defer this application. This application was to proceed in the order as listed on the application, on the agenda, and we should be hearing this application.
Right. Just as a question then, if this now has been put forward as a question again, we should deal with the deferral request
We've already dealt with a deferral request.
in lieu of the new information. So I just ask it as a question because I want to be clear is that either I deal with just a deferral request and not hear any other additional information, or we hear the application in its entirety. So
It had already been decided earlier in the morning that this application, the committee took a vote. It was the decision of the committee not to defer the application, which meant it was the decision of the committee to proceed with the application at today's hearing. So it was put back on the agenda in the order as it was listed. So I don't know why we're entertaining another request.
the only reason I would put it forward is, again, that was information that wasn't shared. So I would just put it forward to the committee if that would be something that changes their decision. But again, I'm just at the indulgence of the committee.
Mr. Chair, I'm not prepared to provide a deferral after I voted against one on the basis that the applicant says, whoops, I'm in trouble, maybe I can change the use a little bit. That's not the way I prepare to operate, and I do not support any deferral.
Understood, but we are making the assumption that that's the train of thought of the applicant.
That's the assumption that I'm making, and I'll stick to it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if there's going to be a change in the application, in my view, we need to hear this application, and then a separate application would need to be filed, because we can't sit here and make a determination whether it falls under this application or not. So I think we decided not to defer the application. I think we have to hear the application. What the applicant is mentioning to us, to me, seems like it's potentially or probably a different application, so we would have to deal with that differently. But what's before us, separately, sorry. So what's before us, I think we need to address, because we did agree not to defer the application.
Okay.
And I go back to the reason why we allow deferrals is for conversation to occur between applicants and the city, and that didn't seem to have happened to any extent. So we'll have to, from my perspective, we'll have to hear the application.
Okay. Any other comments?
May I make a motion?
Yes?
Motion to refuse.
Motion. I don't even know if we really
Through
require.
you, Mr. Chair. I think in all, we have to give consideration to the agent to present his application before the committee rules on a decision.
Through you, Mr. Chair,
But it's a fresh application. If he's changing the use.
We are not, right now we're dealing with the application at hand. This application has not been amended. To do so would require further circulation of the application.
Yes.
Right? So we are dealing with the application
Yes.
as presented.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So again, just for clarity, I'm hearing from both Mr. Crouch and Ms. Stoffler, their decision has not been altered in terms of the deferral request. Thus, if there's any information you'd like to just proceed with your application. I guess I know what would you be at this point in time, and I know I'm being speculative, what would be changed, or what are you looking at doing on this site?
We're interested in removing the transportation part, so there won't be no trucks in there. It's just construction equipment and that, and signs where it would not be visible on the road. As for vehicles coming in and out, it'd be just their pickup trucks. There won't be no dump trucks or any of that, or heavy transportation equipment, or trucks or trailers or any of that. So it's minor. If anything, it'd be the odd equipment like the road grinding equipment would be coming in and out, but mainly, predominantly, they're on site all the time where they're working, and the odd time they'd come back in for a transition and then go back out. Unfortunately, it would be great if I can have some consultants or sufficient amount of time to hire the right consultants for this. I'm slightly new to this process, so.
Mr. Roach?
Through you to the applicant.
I'm sorry?
Through the chair to you.
Yes.
I have a question for you. You now want to change the use from oversized motor vehicles. You now want to change the proposed use from oversized motor vehicles.
Yes.
You're suggesting the paving equipment is not an oversized motor vehicle then?
They're not vehicles itself. They're used on the roads, and it's.
So then please tell me how your use is compatible with the surrounding residential and institutional land uses.
Wow.
How do you say that you're compatible with houses and a place of worship?
Well, in regards to that, across the street, I know it's a separate township because it's Caledon on the opposite side, and all the way down the corridor on the east or west side of Airport Road, you do see industrial, you see trucking, you do see containers. We do have, like Brampton is part, or the people that work in Brampton are in the construction industry as well. Even though they're parking outside in different municipalities and that, if we're gonna grow Brampton, then all the people that would be coming into that area would be still supporting smaller businesses and purchasing stuff. Now they're going outside to spend their money as well.
I don't know how many jobs are creating storing things, but it doesn't make sense to me that it's compatible.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I'll ask from the audience if there's anyone else who would like to speak. which I may ask right now. Because if there's no other questions at this point in time from committee members, whomever would like to come. Okay, just, yeah, if you'd like to step forward and just include your name for the record.
Good morning. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is my first time at a meeting.
Everyone's got a
thank you.
time to speak.
Nosheen Warsi. I'm currently residing on the property at 5923 Mayfield. I just want to add a couple of things to what Roger was saying. So the first thing I want to add is I know that he wants to put in the construction equipment. In my mind, and I'm just thinking out loud, is that one of the concerns in the application that I read here was the disturbance and the trucking coming in and out and kind of clogging up Mayfield Road. I think that was one of the things. Having equipment stored kind of alleviates that. So that's one thing that we were trying to alleviate and trying to address when we were thinking about that. The number of equipment in there, I think I read it was 191 pieces of equipment or truck and trailers and stuff that they wanted to have, which would be coming in and out on a regular basis every day because of the work that they perform. So we wouldn't have that number. We would like some time to kind of adjust to a number that would be suitable for that area. In terms of the landscape that you were talking about just now and how it would kind of be okay with the landscape, from my visuals that I have seen in that area, there are many different types of storage and trucking yards. I don't feel like having just some equipment would change the landscape that much, and if it does, we would comply if there needs to be some kind of a fence or a berm put on there. I wasn't sure if once there was that kind of equipment, would there still be the need for a for a traffic survey. I was not sure. It's my first time. I've never done this, and I just received this a few days ago, so I don't know. In terms of the fact that there was something mentioned in there to say that 70% of the usage of the front was to be kind of like green space, and the alteration would provide only 20 or 25% space. We are currently just reseeding the front to make sure that that green space is available, and would like to, again, find somebody to find out what the proper requirements might be. So I'm not sure if that's, again, I know there was a question posed just a few minutes ago, that is this a separate amendment or is a separate application in itself? I was unsure of what the process was, so we decided to come here and find out what the next things are to proceed, and this is why we were asking for a deferment on this.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Sir, would you like to step forward?
So, my name is, I think I've introduced myself before, my name is Party Pula.
Just, I was told by the tech staff, if you can speak to stuff, yeah,
Okay.
the microphone is more on that side.
Okay. Oh, okay, I got it. This thing here.
The speaker to spell his first name.
First name is Party, P-A-R-D-E-E-P. Last name Bola, B-O-L-A.
Thank you.
So we're at 5955 Mayfield Road. We're next door to the applicant. We're the direct neighbor of the applicant. My parents purchased the property, I don't know, 13 years ago. They retired. It was a rural home in Brampton, on the outskirts of Brampton, touching Caledon, which is pretty much like, I would say there's about 30 or 40 homes in that section. Currently the home is a residential home. The application home is a residential home. And then if you look at the application, they've converted it. I can't really address what they're suggesting today. We can only address exactly what they said, is that today's meeting is about the actual application, and the application is requiring that they want, if you actually see it, it's like 120 trucks, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty unique for a residential home to be converted into this industrial theme park. So we opposed this last year. We had this exact same meeting last year. So we came down and we had the city, and I guess you guys were here. And I think last year it was deferred or it was rejected. So what has happened in a year? Well, the application, as you guys are looking at it, we've had 5 engineering firms come out and look at it. They are about 78% complete on that project, on the existing project. So we've had the city come out, I think 4 or 5 times. I think they find them. I don't know. The city would actually have to address that, try to stop them or prevent them, because they actually don't have a permit to actually do the project, which I thought it was denied or stopped in this room. So I don't know. So that's why when it came out this morning, I asked why we were here, since the application was kind of going forward, like the owner is actually doing whatever they've addressed in the project. So it seems to me that the city was able to, like I don't know how many fines they put out, or they were legally able to stop this from happening. So we're just wondering, like, what should we do? Like, we purchased a residential home on the rules of Brampton, and now it's being converted into an industrial zone, which is still a residential property.
Just for clarity, it's not being converted to an industrial zone. They're seeking a variance.
Sure.
So it's
sure.
not
That's true.
I'd just like to get Ms. Myers, can you just get some clarity? Can we get clarity? Was this application deferred, or was this actually dealt with and refused or approved, which it wasn't, but.
Through you, Mr. Chair, for the benefit of the speaker, this application was deferred indefinitely by this committee. We did have it at an earlier hearing last year, at which time the committee reached a tie vote, resulting in a non-decision on the matter. So we've deferred it indefinitely. The applicant has now requested to bring it back for this hearing, and this is why we are here today.
Just so we can get the.
Yeah, it was deferred indefinitely. There wasn't a decision made to refuse or support.
Okay, so, and then I don't know how many times the city has actually legally fined the company that actually owns that property, but they have done
some clarity on that.
Yeah, they've done it a few times as they've actually constructed exactly what the plan has outlined. So today's meeting, from our perspective, was we didn't understand what the meeting was for. I guess since they've already made it. They've already made it.
I'm going to get some clarity on that.
They've already made it.
You keep saying that it's already been made. What
Yeah, we've had 5 out there, and they've said what's left is, as per the drawing, I think you're missing some curbing and some landscape and but it's pretty much done. Recently, within the last 2 months, they did, I guess the new owners have hired, like they have tenants in there now, which I think these are the tenants.
We are.
So 2 things have happened. We believe the city has said to return the property back to its original state, since you didn't have a permit. So I guess that happens with when you build something, you don't have a permit, you gotta tear it down, I guess. So I don't know if the city has issued it saying that you need to put the grass back, or re-sod, I guess. So that's happening recently. They did that, but I don't know if that's for today's meeting, or they're just doing that as per the city's issuing
we'll speak to that.
A warning, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, we can't make assumptions.
We believe the city has actually told them to do something, and they're actually doing that in their favor, since it's already constructed anyway. So we don't know what's happening. So for our perspective on today's application, with my parents and myself, we strictly oppose this. We do not want to see a residential home being converted into this construction, exactly what it says on the map. We don't want that industrial thing living beside us. There's no way we could ever leave. Like what you're asking, if you look at the map and the diagram, that living beside you, there's no way that could ever be practical. Like you would have 122 trucks right beside your home, which that's a rural 1 acre home that people buy for whatever. So we don't really understand what's happening. I know that the road in front of us is being widened, which, what are you going to do? But we strictly oppose the fact that we can't live like that. And since the reason why we brought out the engineering firms is that we wanted to see, last time I was here, we brought up the issue fact that where do we stand and what can we do? So we don't really know. All I can do is that we can call the city, they come out, they do their thing, but they've already built it. So I don't know, what can we really say? So if they were at about an 80% completion rate, we would probably be in some kind of a legal tender.
Okay, I'm going to continue.
Yeah,
You
like,
keep
I
saying
don't
it's
know.
been built. What has been built?
Exactly
And
what you
where
said.
are you getting these numbers of?
You can do a
75?
satellite imagery of the.
So I'll ask that to.
Yeah, you
staff.
can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
So the grading of the grass for the stones and the trucks to be parked, it's all there.
Okay.
Like visually, you can. It doesn't take much to figure out. It's already done. So so the reason why we brought out the engineering firm is just to figure out where we stand and what we can really do. And if the city can't stop them, then we would have to look at a legal tender.
And the engineering firm, you've done what with them? Is there an actual
No, we
report?
brought out PGL, XCOM, Duffer was there, Graham was out there. They just looked at visually what was there.
But what, have they provided you anything? Do you have anything that you can?
No, we just want a general idea of what's there to that drawing.
Okay.
Like just a general assessment of an average person saying, okay, where are we? What are we doing? How do we get there? And they've all said it's in the higher 80s, but some said it was in the low 70s. So I'm going to go with an average number of 73 today.
Okay.
Completion rate of that diagram.
And respectfully, I'm going to go with, there's nothing before us that we can.
Oh, okay. You know, I should have brought that then.
Right.
Damn. I didn't think that was actually needed in today's hearing.
Okay.
I should have brought that. Yeah, I should have. Okay, that's fair. That was my bad. We can maybe forward that to you after.
Well, we'll have staff speak to some
Yeah,
of those issues.
in terms of what we are, but all we can do is that the fact that where we live today, as a residential home, to open up the window and to see that happening in your backyard, I don't think anybody in this room would ever want that.
Okay.
You buy a home in Brampton as a like whatever you buy a home as, it's a residential home, like that's what you hope for, and that's why we have the bylaws to ensure that no one can take a residential home or other property and convert it to whatever that they choose. So that you or me, that when we build a home or whatever we do, that stays the way it is.
Okay.
You know, like that's why we have 30, 40-year bylaws to ensure that that doesn't happen. Now, I know we do respect the fact that the area is changing, and the city did change to residential. There's like a little version of the home now. It's like special or something. So you can convert it into like some kind of business, like one of those homes where the home is on top and the shop's on the bottom. That was reviewed by the city. But currently today, that whole ravine section there, with the 1 acre lots, are they're there for anyone. So we're really scared the fact that that application supports everybody else down the street. Like this can happen to anyone.
True. And again, just for clarity though,
You know, it's really difficult.
This committee listens to applications
Yeah,
independently.
and that application, we're here to say that we can't live with that.
Okay.
So we can't.
Okay.
And that's all we gotta say. Like, I hope you guys look at the whole situation and how this transcribed, and what do we move forward going tomorrow? Because if in 1 year this has already been constructed, what happens tomorrow?
Okay.
Like, what do we do? I have no idea.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
May I?
Please.
I just want to address a couple of things that Mr. Ball was saying. So the first thing about the reseeding the grass and stuff, we were never told by the city. That was something, because now I live on the premises, I have children. We don't want a trucking where there's 120 trucks going in and out. We have young children. Safety of our children is also a concern to us. We also, where he was mentioning the volume of storage of those trucks, and again, those are things that are going in and out every single day. I do understand the concern of the safety. I understand the concern of him having to look out of his window and seeing these trucks and being woken up in the morning. I really do. Living on that property, of course, I'm going to be a part of that as well. You know, as he mentioned that, you know, the front, maybe the city told us to put it back. It's not. It's something that we took upon ourselves because we would like a beautiful green space as well. As to the construction of whatever's constructed before, I cannot speak to that. I just moved in April, end of April, right around there. So I can only speak to what we would like to do going forward. And of course, instead of having that 100 and some number, we would like to reduce it quite a bit so that, of course, there's not that significant, you know, impact. It is also, maybe a 3 to 5 year plan, where after I know that the owners at some point want to develop that into whatever they want to develop, and our residence there is 3 to 5 years as well. And then, they can move forward with whatever they want. But at this point, I can't speak to everything. I'm not sure going forward if this is, something that I need to work with the city to amend and maybe work with our neighbors and kind of, get everyone on board to something that's livable for all of us, and something that we can work with within the confines of what the city would allow us. And I'm not sure if this is supposed to be something that's totally different. So that's why we're here today, to kind of find out what our next steps could be.
Understood. And again, I'm just going to quickly state, unfortunately, that should have been conveyed earlier, and probably would have been able to rectify that somewhat, because the way I'm hearing this is it's potentially a completely different, some of those variances will change. My concern, and this is just me speaking at this point in time, is that depending on how this goes, and is that you may, if there's a refusal, you'll have to just put a new application in.
Yeah.
I think that's, I'm just trying to potentially save the application fees and the headaches of going through that process. That being said, there should have been some due diligence that was done before, but again, respectfully, it is what it is, and everyone
we
has to learn
apologize
to-
on our end as well. We just received this, and I didn't know what was going on.
We'll get some
until
more
this
information from staff as well in terms of the actual technical side of what was, and perhaps even some of that, what work has been done. And if there are any questions, we'll continue.
Sounds more like Royal Empire should be apologizing to you.
Ms. Loeffler?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just, there's been discussion about whether there has been work done on the site or not work done. Can we get a clarification from city staff?
Through you, Mr. Chair. There has been work done on the site primarily to fill and grade, and some imported fill was brought in. I would say over a year ago, that process had begun. Our public works staff did go out in response to request, and they did then eventually apply for a fill permit, which was denied because the use is not permitted, they're not allowed to store, they're not allowed to regrade. So I understand from our public works staff that the work had ceased temporarily, but I have also been advised that recently additional imported fill has been placed on the site. So it looks as though work is continuing. I don't know the percentage of how much has been paved over. I do have an aerial photo from the fall of last year, which is the most recent we have updated on our system, and it's possibly 40 to 50% paved at this point in time, primarily in the back of the lot, although some work had been done in the front, which was to be employee parking associated with the activities that were expected to take place in the office, which is currently being used as a home. So you're quite right. I believe that if I'm understanding what the intent of this new owner is, I don't know whether the variance to use the house as an office is still being requested. I don't know whether the variance to convert the entire front yard to employee parking for passenger vehicles is still anticipated. And certainly the outside storage of oversized trucks and trailers, I'm hearing, is no longer going to be required. So really the only variance I can confirm would be to permit the outside storage of what's being described as construction equipment and materials. Although I understand that planning staff are looking for additional information about exactly what that constitutes. How high are these vehicles? How are they moved to and from the site? What's the turning radius for the vehicles they have to be loaded on, if they in fact loaded onto trucks and then transported to construction sites? So while some work has taken place, I believe, both by the prior owner and now perhaps continued to a certain extent by this owner, there have been no approvals of any nature, but it's primarily the work that's being described is the repaving or the fill and grading of this property for use as outside storage and potentially parking.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a clarification.
May
Are
I?
you owners of the property, or are you tenants?
We're tenants.
Tenants.
Tenants of the property.
And you have been authorized by the owner to act as the agent.
Yes.
Is that correct? I am trying to withhold my anger as my fellow committee member was not able to. You are responsible, if you're taking on this, for the owner to understand what this application is.
Okay.
And when we asked, when we were being requested deferral for this application, we asked if work had been done on the property, and the answer was no. So please let me
Sorry,
finish.
I apologize.
Please let me finish, because this is upsetting, all right? This is not what the committee is here for. We have an application in front of us. We are going to go through that application as it exists. Any changes that you want to make will have to be filed under a separate application. So you are now responsible for this application. In my view, I can only speak for myself. There are 4 tests that need to be made. This may be your first time here, but there are 4 tests. Every single test fails, according to the city. I will tell you the fourth of 4 tests is whether this is minor in nature. This to me unequivocally is not minor in nature. There is verbiage throughout this report that is in contradiction with everything you're asking for. So whether there's a change in what you're proposing to do or not, there may be a few things that may not be requested, but I don't believe that any of these tests will be met. There is under appropriate development of the land to provide a higher design quality along major roads. What you're proposing is not going to do that. It is not going to be compatible with what the intent for the neighborhood is. What happens in Caledon happens in Caledon. It has no effect on Brampton. So as far as I'm concerned, this application, I'm with my fellow committee member, I really don't even want to hear anymore because we've heard enough. We understand that this is a bit of a folly, and I can't put this onto your shoulders, but the owner of this property knowingly has proceeded with work, and you are now here to request a deferral or a change, and we cannot accept that. So I have the staff's report. I don't even need to hear from the staff at this point in time. I'm ready to make a decision, but I will leave it to the rest of the committee as to what their desire is, because we do have a proper process.
And I'm just going to chime in and respecting committee members. From my perspective, however, quickly, is that I think we're making assumptions on where the mindset of the applicants are and the owners. So that's where I don't think we should get into a speculative nature of what's going on. That's where I think we start treading on dangerous ground of making assumptions on what's going to happen. That's why I think the information before us, with what we have before us, I agree. Therefore, we'll just deal with what we have before us.
We have the facts before us,
right?
And we have confirmation that work has been done on the site, which is a further fact in my books.
So we'll proceed.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm hearing that there's work done. There has not been any work done. We just brought in some soil so that we can reseed the front of the lawn. That's
We want golf-proof grass as
we
well,
want,
right?
We want.
There's so many divots in that, and then the water's going back into the basement of the house. We're just leveling it out so we can cut the grass too. It's all hay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you're going to have to deal with the owner of the property, because the owner is ultimately responsible both for the property, what's done on the property, the applications that are filed against the property, and their tenant, and you are now their tenant. So they have a responsibility to you. But that does not fall under our jurisdiction at this point.
I just wanted to clarify that you know, there wasn't work done in terms of anything additional to whatever was built or ceased or whatever. We were told not to do anything on that. We did not do anything on that. It was just so that we can just reseed the front of the lawn, and that was the only work that might be spoken to at this time. That was the only.
Yep, that's fine. We're starting to get away from the actual issues.
Yeah, okay,
So any other information, any other questions from committee members? Staff, would you like to weigh in with your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff have reviewed the application against the 4 tests outlined in the Planning Act and are recommending that the application be refused on the basis that the application does not conform to the general intent of the official plan. The proposed outside storage would instead compromise the ability for the area to develop for its intended purpose, and therefore does not conform to the general intent of the official plan. Does not conform to the intent of the zoning bylaw, which is to permit primarily residential and institutional-based land uses. It's not considered to be desirable for the appropriate development of the land, as the oversized motor vehicles would be highly visible from both Mayfield Road and Airport Road, and would not be complementary to the surrounding area. And lastly, staff are of the opinion that the requested variance is not minor in nature. It would introduce a use that is not consistent with the existing and surrounding land uses, and there's fundamental concerns with respect to land use compatibility and consistency with the surrounding area.
Okay. And ultimately, just for clarity, recommendation is non-supportable.
Yes.
Okay. Committee members, any questions? Anyone else in the audience here to speak on the application? Then seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to refuse.
Motion to refuse by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Toffler. All in favor? That carries. The application is refused.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just confirming that member Chada and yourself have dissented on this decision. Thank you.
And so for clarity, you do have a 20-day appeal period, and all people have that even residents and neighbors. Therefore, you have that option, or perhaps the other option is just to resubmit a different application with whatever terms. Perhaps starting clean and fresh, but that would be up to you to decide how you want to deal with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Calling application A18139, Fata Developments Inc. Property is located at 1453 Queen Street West.
Good afternoon, members of committee. My name is Richard Domes from GWD Planners. I am agent for Fata Developments Inc., is the owner of 1453 Queen Street East. Committee will recall there's been a number of deferrals on this application over the course of the last year or so, some of which were requested by my clients, some of which were circumstance. But the good news is that we've had a lot of opportunity to have extensive discussions with regional and city staff with respect to this application. And the proposal before you is the interim use of the existing commercial building that exists on the property and has existed since 1969. The building has been vacant for several years and was formerly used as a grocery store and a cafe with an outside patio. Building has gone into a state of slight disrepair over the years, particularly since it's been vacant. And my client is proposing a large investment into the property to bring it up to an appropriate standard for the purposes of temporary use of an additional commercial building, specifically a restaurant use, which would be a fine dining restaurant and a sweet store contained entirely within the existing building. To facilitate this proposal, 3 minor variances are proposed, one of which was to permit the restaurant use. And there's 2 variances required to the site-specific zoning bylaw schedule for the west half of the lands to recognize the existing building and existing proposed landscape and pave areas. Mr. Chair, I do have a large presentation that I could go through if necessary, and because we're late in the day, I'll reserve the right to maybe refer to that presentation if need be after the discussion on the conditions proposed by the
staff. We respect that, and if there is a need or any questions by committee, we can ask you to proceed with that.
Thank you.
Any questions at this point in time by committee members? Anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? No? Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Chair. Staff are in support of this application, subject to a number of conditions. I would just want to draw out from the report is that staff's primary basis for support here is to allow the restaurant type use for a temporary period of time, which would enable the applicant to pursue a zoning bylaw amendment to put the zoning of the property into a proper place over the current fairly restricted zoning, and that's primarily the sole basis for doing this. The area is undergoing some change in terms of, recently the road widening works have happened on there. The region there's an application happening to the east for a redevelopment for townhouses, and then the region has some concerns related to access issues long term, and then there's also a land use plan going on, which this would, like a restaurant type use or a commercial type use would ultimately fit into the long-term, at least what's currently drafted as potential long-term proposed uses for the subject land. So just primarily within that context is where the basis for the staff support is to allow sufficient time for an application to be made to bring the zoning of the lands up into into a proper form that reflects sort of what the long-term planning for the area would be, but then still allow a modest use on the property in terms of a restaurant. So in that regard, staff is in support subject to a number of conditions. First, that the variance 1 only be approved for a maximum of 2 years, and that's the variance related to the permission for a dining and takeout restaurant. The variances 2 and 3 be approved only to the extent shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. So that's the variances related to Schedule C changes, which identify the locations of buildings and then also identify the expansion of the parking area. That number 3, to help ensure that the site functions properly, that a number of plans be approved with regard to change to the site, so that prior to the establishment of the temporary establishment of the restaurant use on the property, the applicant shall submit a site concept development plan, grading and service plan, a stormwater management report, concept elevation drawings, concept landscape drawing studies for review, and these documents be approved to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services and Region of PO Public Works Department. And fourthly, that the prior to establishment of the restaurant use on the property, the applicant shall submit a traffic impact study for review and document be approved to the satisfaction of the Region of PO Public Works. Fifth, that the applicant obtain any required permits related to the development on the site, including grading from the Credit Valley Conservation Authority prior to the establishment of a parking lot on the property. And number 6, that prior to the temporary establishment of the restaurant use, the applicant shall consolidate the pins on the property and demonstrate to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services that this consolidation has been completed. 7th, that prior to occupancy of the building, the applicant shall obtain a permit for change of use. Number 8, there be a restriction that no drive-through facilities or outdoor patio areas shall be permitted on the site. This is to make sure that the use remains modest and any sort of impacts are minimized. And then 9th, finally, is that the failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the variances null and void.
Thank you. That was a mouthful. Mr. Crouch?
Given the applicant has to compile all these studies, and I don't know where he is, how long is this temporary permission really? Is it 6 months? Is it going to take 18 months to file all those reports? And if all those reports are required and then something else comes up, why are we making a decision today at all? Because other variances might well be required, particularly with respect to access.
So it may take some time.
Well, it will take some time.
Yeah. They'll have to, I mean, it's not only on us. It may take them.
Well, it's very much on them too. Yeah.
It's, you know, it may take 12 months to complete all that work. And if there is a has to come back for some additional variance due to a change of something, that's, you know, a risk that has to be taken on this. And unfortunately, there was an original request to the staff to do a full site plan application, not as sort of this condition is positioned as being not under the Planning Act site plan approval. There is concerns related to that from the applicant regarding to an agreement they have with the region related to encroachments. So to help, you know, make that work, we've agreed to this approach, which, but still, you know, the work itself, it would be similar work to make sure that everything's to the satisfaction of the city in terms of the quality of the site and any improvements that need to be made. So,
but we don't deal in satisfaction to the city. We deal whether this is minor or not. And frankly, I can't determine that from this report. I don't.
So staff
if all these studies have to come in, then maybe we'll find out it's minor or major. I don't know.
Through the chair, the only study that's being really requested is a traffic impact study. The plans are a set of drawings which would, the elevations would show an improvements to the elevations, and then a landscape plan and grading and parking plan it's just part of a site plan process. So those are fairly typical things that.
So you presume they're already completed with elevations and everything that will be satisfactory to the director?
I don't know if they're completed.
Okay.
I'll ask the question.
Seems silly to me.
to the consultant, we have those 9 conditions. Are they all satisfactory to you? Because we don't want to start getting into this before, if there are other issues. These conditions as they've been recommended.
The conditions as recommended are satisfactory to my client, with the exception of condition number 1, that the approval be for a maximum of 2 years. Originally, in the initial discussions with the city, we had requested a 4 to 5 year temporary approval, in line with what ultimately became the list of 6 studies and plans that would have to be supportive of the proposal. Through discussions prior to the last deferral, we understand that the city staff is willing to accept a 3-year period. At a 2-year period, the proposal does not become feasible. My client will not be able to get the financing to put the investment into this property, and they can make it work at 3. So our request to committee would be that variance number 1 be amended to allow a minimum 3-year conditional approval. That has been vetted with the regional staff, who have amended their conditions for today's meeting as well. That addresses their concerns as well. The idea is that the 3-year approval will allow the interim use of the existing commercial building for the restaurant use. It has, since 1969, been utilized for commercial, so we're not looking at a retrofit of a residential building to a commercial building. It's an existing building. It's been used for a grocery store and a cafe in the past. There is paving on the site if you've been out there. I recognize that it needs to be replaced because it's degraded and drawing through. But in terms of the site itself, we have a schedule. We're confident that within that schedule that we've advanced with the application, that the paving areas will be facilitated. If it's a matter of grading within that limitation, I think there's flexibility in the schedule that we've advanced to the committee that we can make that work. The only real change to the property that is different, substantially different than proposed, is the eastern portion of the lands where the parking is going to be expanded, and there's sufficient land within that, what I call the additional lands, for some minor flexibility to make the grading work. We're not substantially challenged by that. And in terms of the building elevations and architectural plans, that's something that my client could put forward yesterday, today. We don't need site plan approval to improve the building's appearance. Just necessary building permits, but we've agreed through the discussions with staff that we would facilitate that review with staff to ensure that they're happy.
Okay, thank you. And the reason I ask is I did note on the regional comments that they were seeking that 3-year condition, so that's what I wanted to ask on that. I'm going to take a different perspective from, respectfully from Mr. Cook. I think this has been an exhaustive back and forth between city and applicant. And I actually applaud the fact that you've been able to come to some type of consensus at this point in time. For someone that drives by that area quite frequently, I'd much rather see something operational than a derelict type of building. But at the same time, respecting all the rules and regulations and so forth. So I think that the recommendations are fair, and I would definitely be able to support a 3-year in lieu of the fact that this is very time exhaustive in terms of costs and time. So I think that would be fair enough. So I would be able to support that from my perspective as well. So I'll leave it to any other comments from committee members. And if there's any other comments from staff, the 3-year term, I know the original recommendation is 2-year, but with that, and that's why I'm asking it, as with the regional comments there seems to be an acceptance from the regional staff as well. So I'll speak to that.
So through you, Mr. Chair, our original recommendation of 2 years had come from the region. So originally they had requested a period of 2 years, but upon, like Mr. Dome said, additional discussions with ourselves and their servicing staff, they determined that 3 years would also be appropriate if the committee should feel that that's an appropriate recommendation to make.
Okay.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, to answer one of your committee member, Mr. Couch's question, the issue that, as I understand it from the region, is not the access to the property, but bringing that up to speed with today's current regional road classification standards. When this property was developed, it allowed the 2 accesses. The region, and when it was redone by the region, it maintained those accesses, but through a development application such as a rezoning, which is ultimately going to be pursued, this will allow the interim use of that site for something while we do that, enter into that process, and during that rezoning process, the region is going to investigate the access condition, and those accesses then will be either redesigned, removed, relocated, whatever the case might be. So this is an avenue for the region to get to more regularize based on today's standards through allowing the interim use towards the ultimate vision for that future comprehensive development application.
Okay, fair enough. Any other questions or comments by committee members?
Just that, Mr. Chair, I've read the staff report, and I agree with staff of all their reasons that this should be a 2-year temporary use and not a 3-year temporary use, and that any proposed tenant should be forewarned, as staff has indicated in the report.
Okay.
But I can't support 3 years.
Okay. Well, at this point in time, Mr. Nurse, if you want to speak to it, or if you'd like to, I'll be asking for a motion. Okay. So I leave it.
How long?
3 years.
So at this point, we have 3 of us here, so we'll put forward the motion. If Mr. Crouch would like to put it forward, or Mr. Nurse, I leave it to you.
Well, Mr. Nurse has put it forward, and a no decision doesn't get us anywhere, so I suppose I have to capitulate and go for the 3 years. So I'll second the motion.
Okay. So just for clarity, you understand all the conditions put forward, you agree to them?
We do.
And we're just altering condition 1 to read 3-year as opposed to 2-year. Staff, we're all in agreement with no other suggestions in terms of, okay, so.
Motion to support the application with a 3-year term.
Okay, by Mr. Nurse, seconded by Mr. Crouch. All in favor? That carries, that is approved, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Understanding that there is still that 20-day appeal period, and you're versed in that. If there are no further comments or questions or concerns, seeking a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Mr. Nurse. All in favor? That carries. Meeting is adjourned.
Staff, I'm not going to be here in 3 weeks. I'm going to be golfing in the clock. I just wanted to say I've learned a lot. I appreciate your dedication and hard work. I realize how dedicated and hard it must be in silly little circumstances. And I've had a great...
Seeing that you won't be here, Mr. Crouch, I'd like to thank you and for actually the time we've served together. To your point, I think we've all learned a lot, and I've learned a lot by sitting next to you gentlemen as well. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And in particular,